Gotta put it on your calendar, John. You just gotta put it on your calendar. Like month block.
Doing a long weekend in Florida Friday.
Well, that's good.
You did?
I am.
Where you are?
Friday.
Cool.
Offshore boats are out in front of Fort Myers.
Oh, really?
So go down, it's
Pretty down there.
watch them.
That'll be fun.
But the problem is get down there Friday night or Friday. So I'll unwind, have a good time on Saturday, and on Sunday I'll already be thinking about work coming back Monday morning. It's like,
I got quite a bit.
I'm almost better off just going to VP.
I'm back from Charlotte.
Let's travel. It's not the
But they
same.
did put, they
No,
delayed
it's
my
not.
flight for 11.5 hours. They delayed.
Living the dream.
But they put me up with that. It wasn't weather, it was like they didn't judge us really, I mean, all over.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the hotel was full of people.
Full time home anyway.
Delayed 12 hours.
Cynthia flies to
Hey, Kyle, can you hear us?
well, she's flying to Chicago through to.
Chief, can you hear us?
She's gonna spend a week with Carly before.
Yeah.
Fun to see there.
Carly's boyfriend goes to the house up by Michigan City. Down there for Thanksgiving.
They're
Yeah,
able
it's,
to work and talk.
Kyle, can you hear us? I can't
Yes.
say it.
That's quite a
It's not
accomplishment.
much, but it's-
I would still
It
go.
was great, 'cause we-
I enjoy Ray Mark. Very good.
Wow.
So how are you doing?
Kyle's still
So
hungry.
you don't want to
Stay busy.
an awful lot of
Yeah.
upset.
She's still hungry.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard a bunch of cancellations.
Maybe still downstairs.
Yeah. So,
Did you go out today, Jim?
I did, yeah.
That's how
We love it.
No,
I know,
It
I was
was.
thinking about
I personally did not see any. My daughter didn't see you.
One adult, it's easy.
And copies of the agenda are today.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mayor?
Hey, man.
How you going, sir?
Yeah.
Easy chair.
Easy chair.
No. You doing, Jim?
Good, Al, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Going north?
I was up there, yeah. It's good, huh? Going back after the meeting.
Okay.
Dedicated soul. Dedicated soul. Oh, yeah.
Couldn't it?
I think it's fabulous.
That's going through all.
I think that, the two houses together. I'm looking at it.
Healing.
All right.
He said the plate looks good.
What's that?
No, they rewrote that line.
He's in St. John's.
No, I
He's a site fire out there. Yeah, you don't very often see him
No,
out.
no.
He said there was.
No, I've never, I don't think I ever, well, yeah, so I'm running and I was at park. Can everyone online or on Zoom hear us?
I can.
We can stay this right up. Right, unfortunately, yeah.
After years of being warned about the elimination.
Oh,
I think I finally got it.
yeah.
I mean, I understand the rationale, but a lot of it. Sometimes the bureaucracy. That and any other bureaucracy.
It's like, it's a trap. Like, they love the trap. It's just, yeah.
We do these treatments.
So it's good to confirm.
Kyle's having some technical difficulties.
I'm good now.
He looked good for a while up there. Yeah.
Plenty of time to hunt. Plenty of time to go. Stupid tail, like it's a tail.
Brian, who bought that property, around the. Son and daughter-in-law, unfortunately, down in the Austin area. And they had everybody together for a holiday, just see what's in there. And I remember those. They were pretty special. Well, I remember how different it was from me. And they could go on schedule around.
So whatever I'm doing there, I do it here.
Actually, it's Robert Clark has a place up near Larkson, it's near Larkson Lake. Pretty fancy.
Holy cow. Mark's dad's friend. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Is that one year?
They said it's a crap, which is fine.
Were you out?
Maybe tomorrow. I did go this morning for
You're kidding. Everybody else.
around, but I haven't seen any this year.
The kid, whoever. Natural light.
They're cute. They do kind of destructive, but. Very big.
So it's too.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of those that don't do.
Yeah, if he gets everybody. She was gonna spell out Brussels sprouts, right? Yeah, those people, like, a couple old ladies. And it's the roads all. Go Scott. I love you. Bill.
Township. Yeah.
Okay. All right, everyone, it's 7:00. Let's call this meeting to order. You can all rise for the pledge, please. Al, you know. Get in. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll for us.
Yes, Pat Bagheera, John Leo,
Yes.
John Collins, Al Dyka,
Here.
and Nancy Rondell.
Yep.
We do have a quorum.
Excellent. It's time for citizens' comment. If there's anything someone would like to address the council about that's not on the agenda, it's your time. Name and address, please, for the record.
Pam Tuchinski, 465 State Street. So it's dangerous to ride a bicycle from one end of town to the other because there's no bike path. And I read that the new infrastructure bill has specific funds in it for dedicated bike paths. So I would like to ask that the city of Harbor pay attention to look into whatever we need to do to find out if there might be enough money that we could build one and be safe riding our bikes.
Good idea. Anyone else for citizens' comment?
Did you have me on this?
Okay. This is a good time for you.
All right. Rocky Bay Dune, 117 Main Street, Harbor Ice Cream. I just want, let me see here real quick. I didn't get a chance to type why I'm giving these awards, but I would like to comment on it really quick. I called DPW to trim the tree that's growing into our building on 117 Main Street. And I think it was Dan, if I'm correct, foreman.
Oh.
Engineer? No? Okay. Dan? Yeah, I believe it was Dan. So he came out right away. I mean, didn't put it off for another week. He came out, took a look at it. The next day, the branches are gone. Trash pickup, a wonderful job with DPW. I mean, these guys really worked hard. And for the person that removes the trash in front of my place, that bag is heavy. So I appreciate it. I want to thank them for doing an excellent job in keeping up with the city. They've done an excellent job with plowing snow and everything. And I just want to recognize them for their efforts. So I don't know who can accept this award, but I just want to say thank you very much. We recognize the services that you guys provide. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
We got another one. Sorry, 2 departments have to split this. I don't know how. But I guess whoever has the gun probably wins, but this is to the city manager's office and the police department. We all know we don't have major crimes in the city, I understand. It doesn't have to be that way, but one of our big issues as a business owner is parking. We even got a ticket too, so. I thought this year we had very large crowds. The police department did an excellent job in managing these crowds and managing parking enforcement. I believe at one point, my son, who was working behind the counter, he's a veteran, service disabled. He had a seizure. Within seconds, the police department was there, stabilized him, put him in an ambulance and took him to the hospital. Just the services alone, interacting with the law enforcement officers in our city, very professional group, greatly appreciated. As far as the city manager's office, I don't think I've had interactions with a city manager that you call within minutes. Sometimes he'll respond back to your phone call and address any issues you might have. Jeff, I'm not going to forget about you. You're just a wealth of information. I had to come to him at one point, like, if I want to open up another business in town, send me away. Please don't approve it, because I got way too much going on. We're busy in the construction. Ladies comment about the bike path. I just found out from the DNR today, the state is getting $250 million for parks and recs. And, you know, I can arrange if you want to meet with the DNR, have a conversation, see if there's an opportunity to put in for something. We'd be happy to do that. Right now, they're spending quite a bit of funds on parks and recs. And Petoskey State Park, we got Brimley, Aloha State Park, and the list goes on and on. Literally, not bragging, but my two boys that own the construction company just landed like $7.5 million worth of work just from the state of Michigan, just for the winter. So I'm proud of them, but there's a lot of money that's going to be floating around. Jump in and get it. But anyhow, I appreciate the professionalism that the city portrays themselves to be. The city manager, Kyle, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
but
I can. Thank
you
you.
guys quit, I'm going to another city. Okay, so I want to thank you all. I really appreciate it. We love Harbor Springs, and we would like to do more in the city of Harbor Springs and give back. You know, we're open, even though 2 customers might come in, we're still open to serve the community. Okay, so this is for you, Victor.
Maybe give it a time. Give it a time for the police department.
You all figure it out. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate you guys. All right, take care. Have a good night.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thanks, Rocky.
Bye-bye.
Nice.
Yeah,
That was nice.
That's the high point.
Anyone else want to try and top that one? All right. Anything on the computer, Victor?
Kyle says, thank you, Rocky.
All right.
You forgot to thank the mayor.
All right. Victor holds all the power.
Oh, yeah.
I don't get the gavel anymore. All right, well, I guess we can move right into the consent agenda. Any issues to handle?
I had one adjustment on my bills, but Nick and I got that situated, so
Okay.
we're all set.
Perfect.
Make a motion to approve.
Any comments from the gallery?
Second the motion.
Perfect.
All right, Nancy Rondell.
Yeah.
John Leo,
Yes.
Al Dika,
Yes.
John Cox, and Matt O'Gara.
Yes.
Motion carried.
So, all right. Class.
Yes, class, sorry, so this hopefully will take maybe about 15 minutes. A reorientation for council members. Many of you have been on for several years, paid attention for a long time, but it's always good to have a refresher about council's role, about what city staff does, what our roles are, and some of the basic state statutes and the structure of government here. So really quickly, the presentation outline is there. We'll start with the government structure, go down to council structure, staff, budgeting, ordinances, Open Meetings Act, council meeting structure, city boards and commissions, and other boards and organizations that we're part of. So the Michigan State Constitution was amended in 1908 to allow home rule charters. So that change essentially allowed municipalities to voluntarily incorporate into city. So here you have a couple quotes about the Constitutional Convention of 1908 about the reasoning that they were thinking that, for example, each such city and village shall have power to adopt resolutions and ordinances subject to the Constitution and the law. So that's where we're at Harbor Springs. Is we were incorporated into a village in 1880. Government formed in 1881, and then we became a city in 1932. So there's about 272, actually, I think the number is 275. I got this from an article that was a little outdated, but 275 cities in Michigan, 261 villages. The main difference is that essentially cities provide more services than villages. The cities aren't within a township control, while a village is within a township control. Cities oversee property assessments, tax collection. They provide more services. They oversee elections. Villages don't do that. So that's really a big difference as far as the law is concerned between a village and a city. We don't have an official, like other states have official designations for town. We don't have an official government designation for a town. We have townships, village, city. So that's just something to keep in mind. Even though a lot of people call Harbor Springs a town, we are a town, but we're a city. The city charter grants certain powers and responsibilities to both the council and the manager. Our city charter, October 6, 1932 is when it was ratified or adopted. There was a few revisions, 1950, 1979, and 1993. We're due for a revision. Actually, we've been going through the process to edit our charter to get it up to date with state law and current practice. So it's been about 30 years. So it is due for a change. 30 years actually is the longest it's gone. 1950 to 1979, 29 years. So it's about time. So the council structure and authority. Council has the mayor, four council persons. To serve on council, one must be an elector of the city, a resident for at least 2 years, and not in default in the city, so you don't owe the city any money. All have an equal vote, and you cannot hold office for more than 3 consecutive terms. The mayor is symbolic, but a little more than symbolic. They're the executive head of the city, technically. They're for military law purposes, service of process, ceremonial purposes. They authenticate ordinances and other documents like the bills we pay, so they sign it along with the city clerk and me. And the mayor serves as the chair of the meeting. So those are the extents of the mayor beyond the council, so there are a little more duties, but essentially when it comes to policy making, the same one vote for each person. So legislative governing body of the city, that's what the council is. The powers that you have essentially include passing resolutions and enacting ordinances, and also adopting the budget. Those are really the three big ones, along with levying the taxes, which is associated with adopting the budget. Together, these are known as the policy forming powers, and that's what the legislative branch is in all governments, is the policy making branch. So city manager role and authority, that's me after 2.5 years on the job. Someone stole my hat, but there. So chapters 4, 7, and 8 of the city charter discuss the primary powers and duties and responsibilities of the city manager. City council appoints the city manager, as you know, and serves at the pleasure of council. Council can remove the city manager at any time, except for this first 6 months after an election, where you need a 4/5 majority to remove city manager. That just gives some protection, so to make sure that political changes don't impact the administration of the government. City manager, he really manages all and supervises all the departments and public improvements and work, ensures all the laws are enforced, attends council meetings, has a right to speak but not vote, and can appoint and remove all administrative officers and employees. Here's a little bit of the code of ethics for city manager. Can recommend changes in ordinances and policy, acts as a purchasing agent for the city, can approve contracts for repairs, advises council on the desirability of new contracts, and submits annual budget to council for review and adoption in conjunction with the city clerk and treasurer. So this might be hard to see, but this gives you a general staff structure and staff structure of City of Harbor Springs. The mayor and council above, city manager, you have the policy forming on the left of your screen there, and then you have the administrative services, essentially the employees on the right here. City clerk treasurer, that's Nick Whitaker. Technically, the clerk and treasurer are 2 different positions in our charter, but the charter also allows them to be combined together. It helps because you get one person in that role. It's better than having 2 separate people trying to contract out with them. It's just a little bit easier. Clerk is appointed by city council, serves at the pleasure of council. He's also considered a comptroller and chief accounting officer. He oversees all clerical work, manages elections, signs ordinances and resolutions, is responsible for the meeting minutes, and administers oaths. He acts independently of the city manager with regards to the comptroller duties, but he reports to the city manager in regards to all other duties. The treasurer is also appointed by city council. The main functions there are to be the custodian of all the city's money, collects all the monies owed to the city, such as the taxes, the fines, penalties, and license fees. Our staff at our office right now, there have been some changes. Patty Sutton is our deputy clerk, accounts payable, has been with us for 27 or so years. Bridget Lemire is our deputy treasurer cashier, has been with us about a few months now. And then we have our utility billing assistant, accounts receivable, Tina Honeysett, who's been here for a few years. Public Works Director Lucas Vanderzee, he's right here. He's been in the city over 2 decades. It's a department is established by the city ordinance, oversees water, streets, buildings and grounds, and also electric department as of about a couple of years ago. So there you can see what they really do: repair the streets, sidewalks, alleys, boardwalks, beaches, other public improvements. The electric department was established by ordinance, and we later incorporated under DPW director supervision by resolution. After some retirements and some minor restructuring, it made sense to put the electric department along with the water and sewer under one big DPW branch. It made sense for us at that time, and I think it's working well. Public works staff, we have the streets, water, buildings, and ground side. Here you have some foremen: Daniel Gasco, Brad Baldwin, Jeff, Joe, Josh, John, and Matt are the other DPW employees. From the electric side, Daniel Huey is our supervisor, Jimmy is our foreman, and then John and Greg are linemen, and Don Schlappy, I think, is actually about to be a lineman. He's still in his last tier of apprenticeship. Chief Knight is our police chief. That position was also created by charter, and the police department was established by ordinance. The police chief is charged with the preservation of the peace and order of the city, the protection of the inhabitants from personal violence, and safeguarding the public and private property from destruction. Our full-time police officers are Steve Timmons, who's been with the city for a long time, as well as Josh Johnston, Tyler Swiss, Tyler Hoff, and Nick Strable, who's our newest police officer. Our administrative assistant, Emily Britton, I believe has been with us for about a year or so, almost, yep. So those are and Tyler have been here about 2.5, 3 years. So great additions to the police force. Our assessor and planning and zoning administrator, Jeff Grimm, really 3 roles here. Assessor is appointed by council. Duties are to estimate the value of property and place those valuations on the assessment roll. He staffs the board of review, and all his clerical work technically should be handled by the clerk's office, but I know the guys kind of split that between each other. The planning and zoning administrator is also appointed by council. That's part of the zoning code. The zoning administrator administers and enforces the zoning code, and also assists, Jeff in this case also assists the city clerk and I with city code enforcement. The planning administrator coordinates the planning commission meetings, reviews planning submissions for completeness, and discusses planning and zoning issues with residents and applicants. So there's little 3 roles that one person is filling there. The attorney, Jim Raymer, the attorney is allowed for by charter. The position was established by ordinance. It's the city's official legal advisor and counsel for city. The council, the city manager, or the city clerk at any time can ask the attorney for an opinion, a legal opinion on a matter. As long as with respect to the specific powers and duties of the council. If you have a personal matter, I would seek another attorney. The Marina and Recreation, Harbor Master Michael Johnson has been with us for a while. That position was established by city code. Is appointed by the city manager and oversees our harbor master staff, which are part-time summer staff. Of course, enforces the laws and the rules of the harbor, which we have abundance of. Also is responsible for preparing the data with respect to the harbor and controls general activity at the marina. Parks Director Rachel Roon, that was the position was established by resolution in 2020, appointed by city manager and oversees our park staff, which includes skate park, Kiwanis, parks grounds, and lifeguards. There's probably between 20 and 30 part-time staff anytime during the year. Manages and oversees parks, grounds, and assets, creates and coordinates recreation programming, and develops and implements park plans, which we're working on the master plan for parks this winter. Other staff positions, these are contractual positions. We have Larry Nix, who's our city planner. Our benchmark engineering is our city engineer. Ben Vealing is our city arborist. Our city IT consultant is Andy Frank. DDA director is Margot DeMoose, and fire chief is John Cups. All these have been established either by charter or city code or resolution, except for the IT consultant, who we just need in modern day and age, which was not written into the charter in the 1930s. The budget, all right, section 5, the budget, funds, and millages. So that's a critical aspect of Nick's job here is preparing the budget as well as mine, and council's obviously main job at the end of the year is to approve it, adopt the budget, and set a tax rate. So our general process has been October to November. The manager and the city clerk have been prepares the budget for proposal. The first Monday in December, the city staff presents that to council. Second Monday, we hold a public meeting or a public hearing on the budget, and the third Monday is when council approves the budget after making any recommended changes to staff after that public hearing. This budget includes itemized estimates of expenditures and revenues, explanations for any changes from the year-to-year expenditures and revenues, describe the city's status on bonds and other debt. Right now, for example, we have city hall debt that's due to expire in 2023, the debt we took out for the building of this building and police station, and explains the current status of city funds. Also, we've added in 2019 to this process the capital improvements plan. So we also review that simultaneously with the budget. The planning commission first reviews that, and actually this Thursday they will in late November. So there's the separate funds. The general fund is actually our taxpayer fund essentially. It goes to support police, city hall staff and services such as manager, zoning, assessing, parks, buildings and grounds, recycling, brush, leaf pickup, legal, IT, some engineering and planning services. The revenue we get are property taxes, which about 60% of our revenue comes from property taxes, administrative fees, which are really just transfers from other city fund balances that amounts to about 30% of our revenue, as we'll see later. License, application and permit fees, sales and use tax, so revenue sharing from the state, recreation fees, we get fees from the skate park, but as well as from the townships that contribute money for certain parks and recreation here, as well as donations and grants. Other funds that we have are the Major and Local Street Fund, Fire Authority, Blackbird Museum, which is called our Historical Fund, DDA, Electric Fund, Water and Sewer Fund, the Waterfront and Equipment Fund. The street funds are funded by a combination of state contributions and a local millage that we passed about 3 or 4 years ago, I would say. The DDA is funded by tax increment finance district, the capture for that, and a special assessment on downtown properties. And electric and waterfront, water sewer as well, they're waterfront, they're considered enterprise funds, means they're like a business. So it's not that simple, but that's what they're considered. The millages, so property taxes for the city, county, school, college, and cemetery are all collected by the city. The city then gives the other entities their shares of the taxes. For a homestead resident, only 24% of the taxes on their bill actually goes to the city. The rest goes to those other entities. Right now we have 2 millages. The one is the operating millage, which is 5.74 mils. It should be we're predicting it to be 5.63 mils for 2022. And that has decreased from 7.9 mils in 1991 and every year since 2015 when it was at 6.2 mils. So due to the combined effects of heavily in Proposal A, as we've talked about a lot in this last year, if property values go back, if they go down, we'll have no ability to raise that millage back up to capture any of that lost revenue. The street millage was passed in 2017. We began collecting that as 1 mil in 2018. For 2021, right now, it's 0.948 mils. It'll be down to 0.929 mils and in 2022, and it's highly affects that the same way. So ordinances and resolutions, a big part of the council. Approved ordinances are approved by majority of vote, just like resolutions. If an ordinance is in the zoning code, it also goes through the planning commission. The ordinances apply to everyone in Harbor Springs. They usually carry a penalty for any violation thereof. They're published in a newspaper after adoption, and the charter provides a way for residents to initiate an ordinance by petition. So if they want to change a petition, get a new petition on the records, they have to get a certain amount of signatures and bring it to the council. Council at that point can decide, let's put it up for discussion or say no, and then it goes to a vote. So it's a long convoluted process, but there's a way for residents to get something on the ballot. So resolutions, as I mentioned, are approved by majority of vote of council. Technically, all motions really made can be considered a resolution. The council has resolved to do this, X, Y, and Z. Some states, some entities like to see formal resolutions that are therefore be it resolved that X, Y, and Z happen, but those are only to meet certain requirements that they want to see. But really, any motion you make here is a resolution in short. They're related to the internal affairs of city government usually, it's kind of like policies or procedures as well as resolutions. They don't have an effect of any kind of law. So, you can't violate a resolution. No specific language for resolutions, as I said, unless a specific city ordinance or charter or state law requires one. Open Meetings Act. This was enacted in 1976 to make government more accountable and foster some openness and transparency. It applies to all public bodies with decision-making powers. Requirements: public must be given notice of meetings. A schedule of regular meetings must be published at the beginning of each year. Notices they only need to contain at minimum the city's name, contact information, meeting location, and meeting time. So it's really not that strict in the Michigan state statute. And notices must be posted at the city's principal office and website. So we comply with all that. We go above the minimum, and we actually include all of our agenda items on our notice. Not required, but we do it because I have the agenda prepared, and why not put it out there? We also post it at the IGA, on social media, at the post office, all places where they don't need to be posted, but we go ahead and do that anyway, just to try to get more people involved. Regarding decisions, all decisions must be made at a meeting open to the public, and there must be at least 3 out of the 5, in our case, 3/5 here to make a decision or to deliberate. So members cannot deliberate or discuss any business if there are 3 council members present and a council meeting hasn't been noticed. So that's the potential for a violation of the Open Meetings Act happens. But social gatherings, chance encounters, or if you're attending some training or another meeting and don't speak about the issues, generally that's okay. That doesn't violate Open Meetings Act. One member of council can obviously canvass other members individually to talk about policy issues. There's no problem with that. But email and texting another member during an open meeting, a publicly noticed meeting, is not allowed. It's the same as ex parte communications. It's closed session. Council can only meet in closed session for some specific reasons by state law. We usually meet, here to talk about some lawsuits or real estate issues, but you can talk about strategy, negotiation related to collective bargaining, as well as talk about personnel issues. They must be conducted during the course of an open meeting, so you can't just have a meeting that's just a closed session meeting. You have to notice an open session meeting, go to closed session, go back in open session, and then end the meeting. But any decisions made must be made in open session. All city staff can attend closed session, as well as council can request private citizens related to the agenda or topic at hand. Public attendance. No one can be excluded from attending a public meeting except for a breach of peace at that specific meeting. Council cannot require people to sign in to attend the meeting, but council can establish rules for speaking, and we can establish rule time limits. And we do have our rules. We ask people to give their name and their address before they speak, and we usually limit to 3 minutes, especially if there's a lot of people that want to give public comment. Voting, as quorum is required. A member who has a conflict of interest cannot be counted as part of the quorum for that particular issue. And if you have a question about whether you have a conflict of interest, we can always our attorney, Jim Raymer, will let you know and give you his advice. We also have some conflict of interest rules for other commissions and boards that would generally, I feel, apply as well to council. A motion must be made when one member and supported before going to vote. Abstaining from a vote essentially counts as a no vote. So you can't just abstain if you don't have a conflict of interest because you don't want to vote on an issue. If you do, it counts as a no vote. A tie vote means a motion failed. No proxy voting is allowed. That means Matt can't be in Bahamas and send Jane here to vote on his behalf. Roll call votes are recommended for matters of significance such as large contracts and ordinances. So we'll usually make a discretionary here, whether or not it needs roll call or not. Meeting structure, you guys know this, first and third Mondays of the month. Special meeting can be called by any 2 council members, as long as they do that in writing, or by the mayor. We usually almost always have held our meetings at City Hall, just the place to be. And now we've live streamed them on Zoom and YouTube. Sometimes YouTube and Zoom don't work the way we want them to, but we still strive to get all our meetings, not just council meetings, on there. Our agenda: citizen comments, consent agenda, discussion items, city manager report, an opportunity to talk about boards and commissions, and then old and new business. Other boards, we have the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board, the Harbor Commission, Tree Advisory Board, Downtown Development Authority, and the Board of Review. Plan Commission, Planning and Zoning, Planning Matters, Zoning Board of Appeals and Decisions and Variances. Harbor Commission advises council on matters related to the harbor. Tree Advisory Board was established by resolution and also assists the council and manager with issues related to trees and managing their urban canopy. The DDA analyzes the impact of economic changes. They promote orderly economic growth, implement their development plan, which they pass every so often. And then the Board of Review meets a few times a year, which their aim is to hear protests from taxpayers on their values, settle the protests of assessment, correct some errors, and receive homestead applications. So all of these have either been established by charter, code, or resolution. We have also recently established the Marina Park Committee to look at long-term and short-term solutions at Marina Park, and then the Redevelopment Ready Community Committee, which was established in 2019 to help push the city forward in economic development and redevelopment. That was put on pause due to COVID-19 and other priorities. Not enough staff time for that. But now with Parks Director Rachel just went through that training, passed the test today, I think. And so we were looking to reignite that one because there'd be grant funding available. For example, the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, only gives out grants if you are engaged in this process. And so there may be grants available for parks and other things that we could access, but we have to be engaged in this process. Excuse me. We're part of a bunch of other organizations, Michigan Municipal League, they advocate for municipalities, the Fire Authority, other townships are part of that authority, Airport Authority as well. We actually own the airport land. We lease the airport land to the authority, which we are a member of. Michigan Public Power Agency and the Michigan Municipal Electric Association, these really are pretty big organizations that we're involved in. The power agency, they purchase power for us. They do manages our energy related services. They walk us through plans. They acquire energy resources for us. So without them, there's no way our city staff would be able to manage our electric department. Same thing with the MMEA. They're more of like the Electrical Trade Association. They kind of lobby on behalf of utilities, municipal utilities. So they do take quite a bit of my time. So, there's a couple of meetings a month. They're in Lansing. They have to be in person. So you have to go. So they have usually 2-3 meetings a week. Well, I'd say about 2 meetings a week for their committees. They have about a dozen committees. So it's a lot of work, that one. Central Dispatch Authority, 911. This is again for the 3 counties, Charlotte, Sheboygan, and Emmett counties. Each of those counties, well, at least in Emmett County, the cities are allowed to have 1 representative serve on that board, and I'm that representative between Petoskey and Harbor Springs. So that's all. Any questions about council? City government.
That's a great overview.
There are
Good
resources.
reminder.
If you want training, more training, there's always, seminars and stuff. If you feel like you need more, want to ever attend an MML, Michigan Municipal League event, just let me know. A lot of resources there. All right.
Great.
All right, so now we have Superintendent Michael Barron. He's going to talk about some of the long-range plans, facilities plan for the school. Particularly also we have Ottawa Stadium, which we own, and we have a 99-year lease for the school, and there might be one to do some improvements there. So let me get your presentation up. I want to share the screen on. All right, I think good to go. Oh, you're talking?
I was going to do a slight intro and anyways, I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to give a very short presentation tonight of what our board is thinking. Victor, you did an incredible job of really explaining the role of council and city administration, and wow, I learned a lot. Any chance chance you can take that show into one of our government classes,
Yes.
and that would be great. Thank you. I'm also a resident of the city of Harbor Springs. Wouldn't live there anywhere else in this world. And I want to thank council for all that you do. And certainly the administration, the city police. I echo everything that the owner of Harbor Ice Cream said as well. It's just an incredible place to live. Hopefully, one of the things that also makes it great are the schools. And we're going to be approaching we are approaching the residents within the boundaries of the school district, which consists of, I think, 7 townships in the city of Harbor Springs, about bond issue coming up May of 22. We have a window of opportunity where we do have some debt falling off. We can go to the voters for a no tax levy increase. Matter of fact, even lower it a little bit. So the board is seeking input and feedback from all stakeholders, not just school district, people affiliated with the school district, like parents and staff. We need input from the voters, especially. So we're asking you, council, everybody, please get the word out. We want as many people as possible to complete a very quick survey, but hopefully after seeing the video. So the video and the survey are all posted on our website. I didn't make enough copies, but it's also the survey is accessible by putting a QR code on your phone and such. But if we can go ahead and show the video, looks like it's playing in the background there, but
I bet there's a route where I'm going, man, I can just feel this guy's body language. There's gonna be some places where we miss, we're not on the same page, that's okay. Gotta continue to build that chemistry, just go out there and trust him to do his thing, and I hope
a lot of people skeptical how this whole thing's gonna play out, they all have their opinion of why it won't. I kind of want to flip it on you and ask you this, why will it work?
something that I've just been kind of wowed by since I got here, it's just the
See how much that money still has left. Chances are we make it.
Besides, I've gotten you in enough trouble.
Don't call this trouble.
Oh, I appreciate what you're trying to do, really, but it's pointless. Mel is my brother, he's my problem. You don't think it is. Gee, I love it. Man, we'll take no for an answer.
And really gives you,
Sorry, guys.
really gives you a chance to give us feedback on each component progress that's being considered. So if you go to our website, you can view the video again. If not, the link to the survey is on our website as well. I do have about 8 handouts. If you'd like one, raise your hand. It has the link to the survey. You can just go right on it. If not, if you could go right to our website, that would be great too. You can still have more who would like one.
Peter, do you have one on our bulletin board? I don't know. I can do one. Yeah, that'd be great. Especially if it has a QR code. Share that.
Anyone else? I have some others. We really want your feedback. And there's open-ended space too to put your questions or what you're thinking is. So I'll leave 2 extra with you guys.
Yeah, I'll put them at the front desk.
We'll put that out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, moving on to item 3C, which is a presentation on revenue options. So with the failure of the Headley override, the city now has to face the task of either making modest cuts to the budget or, well, the severity and the length of those cuts would depend on our ability to raise revenue through other means. So the following presentation is a comprehensive examination of the several common and uncommon revenue sources for Michigan cities with an analysis of their drawbacks and benefits. So just because these are on here doesn't mean they're recommended, but I do have a recommendation at the end, but that's up to council to decide how council wants to proceed. We could try one of these routes, or we could try none of them and just focus on cuts. So I would ask council to instruct staff to bring back a detailed plan to council on any of the revenue generating options that you would like us to pursue. Otherwise, we'll come back on December 6th with the budget as we're moving forward with it right now. All right, so revenue options for the city. So as you know, the Headley override failed. It was pretty overwhelmingly 67 to 33%. There were several reasons given, residents didn't understand the need, why we need to go to 15, uncapped to 15 mils, or why we're doing 20 years, or what the Headley override really, what the effects of it really were. We did try a large campaign to reach out to people. We sent letters to every resident. We wrote articles in the Harbor Light. We had 3 evening presentations, 3 or 4 lunches that no one showed up to either any of those meetings. We went to a couple coffee mornings or to coffee shops in the morning. Nick and I went and talked to residents, but really no one showed up and had an interest in learning about it, at least from June, July, and August. So that was one hiccup we had. Plenty of material was circulated on the website and Facebook, and there was some misinformation and misunderstanding about the purpose and effects of the code. The public survey showed that residents want continued levels of service with respect to police, brush, leaf pickup, recycling, water, and electric service. They want increased communication, better technology, and more zoning enforcement. They want the utility lines to be buried at the city's expense. They want purchase of more waterfront property. They want more investments in waterfront parks. They want year-round recreation activities, more trails in town. They want increase their same amount of park amenities to pay in the park. Some parks they want more love at, some they don't want as much love at. Affordable housing, those are big issues for some residents, many residents, and they want activities and amenities for all age groups. So these are what the residents want. The city, however, needs to remain fiscally responsible. And there's 2 options to do that. One is to raise revenue. The other is to reduce services, decrease programs and amenities, and delay or cancel infrastructure projects. Cutting services, decreasing amenities, and delaying canceling infrastructure projects does not seem to be what the community wants. Therefore, I think we for sure should first examine ways to raise revenue before we pursue cuts. We only should make significant cuts if city council does not want to pursue these revenue generating options, or if those options do not produce enough revenue. So what are these revenue generating options? I think first I want to say a word on revenue diversification. I kind of talked about this a little bit. I hinted at it at the council orientation presentation. So revenue diversification ensures that all local governments can still provide basic services and amenities to its residents during economic downturns or instability. The city's general fund revenue streams are not well diversified. We rely heavily on property taxes, which amount to 60% of our general fund revenue. About 30% of our revenue in general fund comes from other city funds, which means we are keeping our general fund operations afloat by charging other funds. For example, our electric fund transfers over $300,000 into our general fund every year. So over the course of 2 decades, we've transferred over $6 million from our electric fund into our general fund. And now we need to do $10+ million of work in our electric department. And if we had that $6 million there, we would have been able to not have to take out bonds for that. But anyway, that's the problem, though, with relying on other funds to pump up our general fund. So this is not sustainable for our general fund or the other city funds, especially taking into consideration the Headley rollback. So a breakdown there is 1% come from donations, 2% of our revenue comes from recreation fees, 3.5% from state sales and use taxes, 6% from fire protection fees, 7% from transfer in from electric fund, which there's also electric and administrative fee portion. So 16% from the administrative fees we charge to other city funds, 57% from property taxes, 3% from tax collection fees, And then 5.5% from others, such as short-term rentals, grants, planning and zoning fees, and et cetera. So a little equation here, little revenue diversification plus inability to adjust property tax rate, which will equal financial turmoil and periods of economic stability. So the city does not have an expenditure problem, it has a revenue problem. If there's a significant economic downturn, we won't have the revenue stream to provide basic services and amenities, let alone to make major necessary infrastructure repairs. We'll have to borrow money, but with diminishing reserves, our credit rating will decrease and we'll get unfavorable bond rates, tying the city to years of debt payments and forcing us to continue those cuts to basic services and amenities so we can pay back that bond interest. So the lower our reserves go, the higher bond interest goes, which means the less amenities and services we can provide in the future. Right now, we're paying about $70,000 from our general fund in bond payments and about another $8,000 in interest because of these buildings, the bonds we took out. So that's almost $80,000 we could be doing for a service, but we have a bond out that we can't use that money for anything other than paying back that debt. So the revenue generating options, we have property taxes, which are the most common for most municipalities and 60% of our general fund, special assessments, city income tax, expanding the tax base, paid public parking, rental license program, the sale of public resources, and grants and donations. Those are 8 pretty big revenue streams that other municipalities and some look into. So on property taxes, so this 98% number, that is a number, the percentage of Michigan cities whose residents pay more in property taxes than Harbor Springs residents. So our homestead residents paid a combined millage rate, so that's the city, county, and school taxes of 28.75 mils. Only residents in 5 of the 275 Michigan cities pay a lower tax rate. 2 of those cities have a median household income of $23,000, with a fourth of their population living in poverty, and the other 3 have higher city-specific millage rates. Why is this important? It's because we're a city. If we want to offer all these city services that our residents want, we can't do it at one of the lowest rates. If we want to be the best, if Harbor Springs wants to be known as the best city, and we're paying the lowest taxes, how can we be the best? That's an important number to keep in mind, that 98% of other cities pay lower tax rates. So our tax rates are not that high relatively. So here's a histogram of the millage rates through the other cities. So we're right here. We fall in this range. All the other cities fall mostly in this between 36 and 48 range of mills. So the average millage Michigan City resident pays 45.6 mils. That's about 17 mils more than the Harbor Springs resident. Harbor Springs residents want and expect the same or better service amenities as these cities, but have not given the city flexibility to adjust its millage rate to reverse the negative effects of Headley Proposal A. Residents want exceptional city services and amenities at a charter township millage rate level. I say that because charter townships are allowed to levy up to 5 mils. So we want to have city services, but at a township millage rate level, which we're at 5.6 mils. Some townships are at 5 mils, but we have to provide many more services than townships have to provide. So for now, the city's general fund's operating millage rate will continue to decrease, and so will services unless we pursue other revenue raising options. One option is to go back to the voters with a heavily override request in 3 to 5 years, perhaps with different terms, maybe not 20 years, maybe 10 years, maybe not 15 mils, maybe lower. Whatever we do, we can't do it for a few years. So it's not going to solve any of that short-term revenue stream problem we have. So other property taxes that are very common. One is a parks and recreation millage. A lot of cities have parks and recreation millages. Some are for facilities, some are for recreation and general operations of parks and recreation. What this would allow us to do is put aside money specifically for maintenance and improvements of the parks, as well as create more diverse recreation programming. It frees up funds in the general fund for non-parks operating costs. So let's say we take away $200,000 from the general fund to put in the parks. Now you have $200,000 to provide those other services that we otherwise would have to cut. It will delay but not eliminate the need to reduce services and amenities. So I think a parks millage would probably be easier for the public to digest than the Headley override vote. It's an easier issue to understand. But is there an appetite to increase taxes for parks purposes? So on our master plan survey, 49% of residents indicated they would not approve the parks millage, 39% said yes. So that's more than the 33% that voted yes for Headley, but it's still not close to getting approval. So the other one is a public safety millage. The police department is about 1/3 of the city's general fund budget. The city's fire department's obligations are about 7%. So our master plan survey shows that 94% of residents are satisfied or very satisfied with our current levels of police department services. 90% are satisfied with the fire department services. John, you have some catching up to do, Kyle. A public safety millage would help to fund the current levels of police and fire services. Without any revenue increase, we may have to reduce our public safety services such as 24/7 police coverage. So statewide, public safety millages have been well received. The unknown, how will Harbor Springs residents perceive it as a means to preserve the existing levels of service or as a way to free up funds to do other things? So other types of special millages that some other communities do. You have the list there: recycling, senior citizen services, parking lots, sewer wastewater millage, city facilities, buildings and grounds, leaf brush pickup, library. We don't have a library, obviously. Right of way, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So not all of these millage types are applicable to Harbor Springs' current budget. And we also currently have that streets millage. So, but other communities have passed these types of millages, and they may be necessary to consider if we keep some of these, if we want to keep some of these services and amenities, or if we want to pursue them in the future. All right, so the other option is a special assessment. So special assessments aren't considered a tax. They're a levy designed to recover the cost of improvements that confer local and peculiar benefits upon a property within a defined area. So the theory is that a special assessment enhances a property's value over the long run. So some examples include rubbish special assessment, recycling, street improvements, street lighting, pavements, roads, weed control, right-of-way maintenance, erosion control, etc. Special assessments are not subject to heavy rollback. So here's a process for how you would approve a special assessment. It's a very simplified process. It's much longer than this, but you prepare and present plans that describes the project and improvements, shows the geographical area of the proposed project's benefits and the cost estimates. So let's say you wanted to control weeds on 3rd Street, right? You would get a list of all the houses, show all the street and describe the project and then talk about the special assessment need to control weeds on 3rd Street. I'm not saying we have a weed problem on 3rd Street, just as an example. I'll hold a public hearing to establish the special assessment district. Then you define that the project is necessary and adopt a resolution to create that district. You have to then distribute those costs between the houses, and the benefits can only have one meaning: an increase in the market value of a property. So you have to show that by doing this project, by getting rid of the weeds, you would improve, theoretically increase the value of the properties there. Then you have to hold a second public hearing and then pass a resolution detailing to the dates, to bill people, the due dates, to interest rates, and whether or not the payments shall be made in several installments or whatnot. So it's a process, but it's there. Option 3 is city income tax. Act 284 of 1964 allows Michigan cities to collect income tax from residents who live in the city and people who work in the city. So there's 24 Michigan cities, and these are most of them are large cities that collect income tax. Grand Rapids, Grayling, Battle Creek, Jackson, Lansing, East Lansing, Muskegon, Port Huron, Detroit, Saginaw. Cities can collect up to 1% in income tax on residents and businesses and up to 0.5% on non-residents who work in the city, with the caveat that the tax rate on non-residents cannot be greater than half of the residence rate. A resident is defined as someone who has his or her true fixed and permanent home in the city to which he or she intends to return. This tax applies to salary, bonuses, wages, dividends, net profits, capital gains, applies to a lot. To tax income, 2 major steps must happen. The city must adopt the uniform city tax ordinance, and the registered qualified electors must approve the income tax. So what are the pros of this one? Well, it shifts some of the burden from maintenance and improvements to users. So those who work in Harbor Springs, theoretically, they use our streets, they use the sidewalks, they use the parks, they use the water and sewer. When they drink water and go to the bathroom, they use police protection. So they should be paying some of that. It also allows the municipality to diversify its revenue sources, which insulates us from negative effects of decreases in property values. Because sometimes if property values go down, it doesn't necessarily mean your income goes down. It's not always correlated. So it helps you insulate there. But the cons are pretty big cons. Employees may decide not to work here. They can work somewhere else, same business, and not be subject to an income tax. Residents tend to have less appetite for income taxes than for property taxes. And the Michigan Republican Party has been actually considering ways to eliminate a city's ability to tax non-residents, saying that people should not be taxed without representation. So if they eliminate that, then there's no point to just tax our residents, when the point of this would be to get non-residents who use our services to pay for those services. So option 4, expand the tax base. These are 2 major potential ways to expand the tax base. One is to relax our zoning regulations. And the second is to consider annexation and/or 425 agreements. Expanding the tax base with the relaxing of zoning regulations. So with Headley, the millage rate is reduced when you have additions or expansions of structure and transfers of ownership of properties. So transfers of ownership affect the millage rate reduction the most. So when a house is uncapped after being sold, that property owner pays a higher tax rate, and then the taxable value is added to the tax roll. But then the city's overall tax rate is reduced so that the city does not capture any more money than it was before that property was uncapped. However, the millage rate reduction due to additions and expansions is not as great as uncapping of properties. So it's preferable to encourage residents and businesses to stay and to build more if you want to capture more money. Some ways to do this include reducing setbacks, creating smaller lots, allowing more volume of structures so people to build higher and wider, and prevent the merging of lots. Of course, the big question to ask is, will allowing more density and more buildable area and volume fit with the master plan and the residents' vision for Harbor Springs? You don't want to just do this just to raise money. You want to make sure this is what you want the city to look like through the master plan process. Annexations and 425 agreements. Annexations allow the city to incorporate surrounding township land into the city's limits. The 425 agreements are very similar. We actually have one on the west 425 agreement with some homes and property owners on the west side of town, but they're limited to 50 years and they have to serve a specific purpose, whether it's commercial development, housing developments, or protecting the environment. So there's 2 different ways. 425 are definitely less controversial than annexation attempts. So of course, the addition of annexed land or 425 agreement land adds that money to the city tax roll, and that those properties are not subject to Headley, meaning that the residence tax rate will not decrease due to the increased value when you add that initial transfer of those properties to our tax roll. The amount of taxable value the city could get is relatively high for the amount of area we would have to service. For example, if you look at Harbor Point and Weekly, they're the 2 they make sense for annexation. Small areas with high taxable value properties. But there's some big cons there. So annexation discussion attempts have happened in the past, in the last few decades, and they were not well received by those who we were looking to annex. So they still increase the amount of area for which the city must provide services and entities. You never know what problems you might run into when it comes to road repair or water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure. I know there's some big water sewer infrastructure issues with Wisconsin. So that's one thing. Also, eventually, Headley will eventually kick in. So it delays having the need to cut certain services and amenities, but eventually Headley will kick in and affect those properties as well. So option 5, paid public parking. So let's just go through the pros and cons here. The pros are it shifts the burden of maintaining our parking lots, supportive related amenities, and enforcing parking regulations to those who use parking. So it shifts the burden to the users and not to the taxpayers. We can control when, dates, and times, and where to enforce the parking. We relieve summertime parking issues by having more people park further away from downtown. A revenue source that is based on use and not property values or income values, which means revenue diversification, true revenue diversification. We'll cover significant parking lots and police costs, meaning tax monies can be shifted to other operations. And police, this is a big one as well. Police can no longer chalk tires according to Michigan or the Michigan court system. And paid parking is a mechanism to enforce parking without chalking tires. The cons, year-round residents will not like that they have to pay for parking. Businesses may argue that paid parking could drive away patrons. The addition of kiosks look better than meters, but they still will cause more visual and physical clutter and congestion on sidewalks. And paid parking slightly takes away from the small town charm and makes Harbor Springs feel more like a city. But some counter arguments to that. Residents do not want to roll back Headley or have a higher millage rate, so we must either find new sources of revenue or reduce maintenance and services. So that's where we're at. People will notice paid parking, but it will not drive people away from visiting Harbor. So we'll still have people using our parking lots like they use Petoskey and Charlotte. And Harbor Springs, frankly, is not a village or a town, it's a city. So we want to provide city level services we have to look at city level solutions. What could a paid parking scheme look like? I would estimate initial cost of $50,000 to $100,000 for kiosks, installation of necessary infrastructure. That depends on how many kiosks. This number is for between 7 to 15 kiosks. Additional cost to the city budget may be about $5,000 to $10,000 annually. Revenue could be between $100,000 and $300,000 depending on how we do it. Recommended, just as this recommended hourly rate would be $1 an hour, Monday through Saturday with whatnot, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the summer months. You could do all year long too. Obviously, that's what the task does. Here's a suggested downtown district is a suggested area for paid parking locations are heavily used. The 3rd Street between Gardner and State, as well as Main and Bay, as well as the Harbor Master parking lot. Of course, boaters would still get a regular permit that comes with their slip or mooring. What happened there? Projector's on.
It's still on, it's flickering.
There we go. Thanks for looking at it. So this 250 is the number of spaces that will be proposed in our paid parking zone. Petoskey has 450. Their revenue is about, and they're metered all year long. So their revenue is about $550,000. They do about $200,000 in parking fines. Well, that's the projection for 2022. If we have similar per capita visits, but with only 6 months annually and that we're smaller, but less overall parking, I would say, $200,000 is something we could expect, but if you want to be very conservative, $100,000 annually is what we would expect. That would add 3% revenue to our budget. If it's $100,000, $200,000 would add 6%. So it could be a big injection if we want it to be. Option 6, rental license program. So really this is an annual license program fee for all property owners renting out their homes, whether on a short-term or long-term basis. Right now we have a short-term rental license fee. We don't have a long-term rental license fee. This program could probably be implemented regardless of the short-term rental bill's passage in Michigan legislature. It would be established to ensure rentals are meeting certain code requirements. It would need additional staff and resources, but those costs would be covered by any fee that we establish with a rental license fee. We would do inspections, code enforcement, et cetera. But a drawback is that it's a lot of work, and I don't think it should be used as a revenue generating opportunity, but as a way to address an issue, such as if we had a lot of rentals that were in poor condition, protecting the residents' welfare. So do we have a serious enough issue with all rentals to warrant a license program? And that's a question that I don't know. I don't think we do, but so I would only suggest going with that path if we really had an issue with rentals. Selling public resources. We have 2 types of public resources: land, which are within the city limits, which include parks, buildings, and empty space. Outside the city limits, we have some empty lots on airport land. Utility infrastructure, water and stormwater and electric system. For our purposes, water and stormwater is really not something we could probably sell. Most of that is usually within municipal control. So selling public land, the pros: you get an injection of cash into the operating fund. It reduces the upgrades and maintenance costs because you have less land to maintain. Now you have less money to spend on maintenance. If it's developed, there's a potential to add it to the tax roll. But the negatives are people want more public space, not less. Several parcels have deed restrictions, which make them impossible to sell. The revenue received from the sale would not be consistent, so it would be great for the first couple of years, but then after that, the revenue is gone. And the process to sell public land requires a vote of the electors, which would likely shoot down sale of the most valuable public lands because people want those, rightfully so. They want that land to be public. So selling our public electric system. Well, a pro of that is, well, I haven't explored the actual value of our system. It's a lot. Similar size municipal systems have sold for between $10 and $20 million. That means less operations for the city. For example, I spend probably about 5 hours a week on electric operations. I'm going to meetings, et cetera. That time could be diverted to general fund operating things. But there's a lot of cons there. The city's rates are very competitive. Even with a potential future rate increase, our costs of services and cost of service increase, our rates are still very competitive. We don't want to do our residents a disservice. They want to make them pay more for their rates than they have to. Larger electric cooperatives and their companies' employees often do not have the same local response time and attachment to the community. There might be someone coming for 3 hours away to fix up a down power line, so that's a negative. And many believe that municipalities and thus the public should actually be in control of the basic necessities for the community, such as water, wastewater, energy, roads, parks, recycling, et cetera. So I don't think that's one that would really fly well with the public. So option 8, grants and donations. So grants and donations consist of a small portion of our city's general fund. Recent donations have been for pickleball courts. We're getting some for the skate park. Police department gets donations each year. Tree plantings, unpaid utility bills. We've gotten grants this past year past couple of years for pickleball courts, the tree plantings, parks and recreation events, COVID-19 relief efforts. The pros, so grants can supplement projects that are already on the docket. Receiving grants and following through with a successful project makes it easier in some cases to get more grants. And the publicity and credibility associated with grants can attract attention and investments from others, such as businesses, residents, and other government organizations. The cons, there's been an increased competition for grants, especially now. On average, only about 10% of applicants for a grant receive any funds. Of course, it depends on the grant, but still that's an average for all grants. Harbor Springs is often classified and perceived as a wealthy community, which reduces our chances for certain grants. A lot of grants require you to be in, I won't say a poor area, but in a less wealthy area. Most grants have a maximum match of 50% of the project's cost, meaning you can't rely on a grant to fund an entire project. You can mix and match other grants, but it's a lot of staff time. So that's, as I put there, some grant applications require significant staff time. I know that a lot of staff time was put in the Harbor Master Waterfront Grant, and also a lot of several state and federal stipulations, conditions that can make grants less desirable. We also, for example, the Boardwalk, we look at that for grants. MDOT said no, it wouldn't be a good candidate. DNR said no, it would be a good candidate. So now we're looking at MEDC, which might be a good candidate for that, and other grants. MDOT said yes to our bike path being a potential good option for a grant, extending the bike path down Bay Street, but not for the Boardwalk. So, you gotta, there's a lot of conversations with the grant coordinators and talking about what works and what doesn't work. So they're good, but they're not always easy. So donations, free money, that's the biggest pro. It's really free. I mean, I put it in quotes as you'll see under the cons, but it's free money. Significant donations for desirable projects can also motivate others to donate more. So, when one person sees someone donate $15,000 for tree planting, someone's like, oh, I want to do that. Let me donate some money for trees. So it's a good way to get people, it's a good publicity and get others to donate. But there's also increased competition for donations. There's a lot of nonprofits and community organizations that are looking for money. As you know, a couple meetings ago, the Garden Club came here seeking money because their donors aren't giving as much money to the Garden Club as they were. So now they're coming to the city for money. So there's increased competition for donations. Some donors, like it or not, they implicitly expect something in return. They may not say it right then and there, but they give money now, and then later in the future, they may say, well, this is what I did for the city. What are you gonna do for me? Some donations are contingent on certain conditions, which could alter community's goals for the project. We had someone call, they want to donate some money for pickleball courts, but it was down on a different side of town. They wouldn't donate money, for example, for the bathroom facilities or parking facilities. So, do we keep our pickleball courts where they're at, or do we move them to get the money from the donor? It's not an easy decision. You want to have a plan first and then hope that people donate to the plan that you have, not change your plan based on what a donor wants. Many donors don't want to donate to basic maintenance projects for city's operational needs. A roof on City Hall, redo a parking lot, air conditioning City Hall, and things like these are not the things that people donate to. So we still need our operational money for there. But for grandiose projects, we had someone want to donate for Kiwanis tow rope. We have skate park donations going around. People donate tables and stuff like that. So there are things that people want to donate to, but other things people don't. So all these revenue options, I have this little chart here about what I think is easier to accomplish and what has a greater revenue potential. I think it's easier to accomplish paid parking and special assessments because that's a council decision. That's really just a council thing. And it also will have greater revenue potential. Easier to accomplish, but with not as much revenue potential as the zoning modifications. It's a long process. So it's easy to do, but it's going to be a long process before you see, a lot of value added to the tax roll. Grants and donations, they're easy to accomplish, but most of them are less revenue potential when you're talking about projects, maximum 50%, grant awards usually. It depends on how much staff you have dedicated to that. The more staff you have dedicated to that, the more likely to receive funds. But that means you have to pay more money for staff to do that or take away staff from doing other things. So there's pros and cons to that. Greater potential revenue, but are really hard to do, I would say. Annexation 425 agreements, parks millage, public safety millage. At this point, any kind of millage right now would be hard to accomplish. Selling the electric system, which I wouldn't recommend anyway, and then easier, harder to accomplish, but also less revenue potential, the rental program, selling the public land and other special millages. Usually special millages, some people do like a mill or half a mill for, leaf and brush pickup or for recycling pickup and refuse pickup, not huge money generators, but again, it's going to vote the people for a specific reason. So this is a hypothetical, what I would do, what I would recommend would be paid public parking. That's the one that we can do, shift the burden to the users. It's not going to be popular with a lot of people, but it does shift the costs of maintaining parking lots, parks, infrastructure down there in the downtown to the users. Parks millage would be good to try, or a public safeties millage if we want to try to free up some funds in the general fund. Try again for a heavy override in a few years. If that fails, then we have to have the hard talks, I think, of annexation, 425 agreements, special millages, or income tax. We'll always be looking at grants, donations, and special assessments on a project basis. So that's something we'll always be looking into. Not recommended, as I said, rental license program at this time. I don't think we have a big issue in selling public resources. Residents are still best served by the land, having the land we have, and keeping our own electric department. If our electric department, our rates and services ever get to the point where someone else, another company gives them a better deal, where they'd be paying lower rates, then it might be time at that point to consider that. But at this point, I don't think that point's ever going to come. But you never know what the future holds. So that's my recommendation, my presentation analysis. I know it's a lot to digest, but I think, we have December 6th coming up is when we're going to present the budget to council, and what we do here could impact how we adjust the budget. So if not, we'll adjust the budget and reconsider this next year or a year later. We don't need a rush to do any of this, but it's just the timing of it. So give council an opportunity first to speak for the public.
Is vote for bourbon.
Distiller.
The delay to go for a Headley override again, is there something specific in law that says you have to wait between attempts?
There is, and I think it's 2 years. If it's for the same ask though, I don't know. The question we have to ask is, if we make it substantially different, can we put it back on the list, on the ballot? And that's the question I know Nick was going to have put out to the state election.
I haven't heard back.
Yeah, I haven't heard back yet.
Because in talking to the people that pushed for the defeat, they claim it was the term, not so much the concept. So they would have been inclined to vote for it if it had been for 5 years rather than 20 years. And I've heard that from many people that, as have I.
So that'd be something that we could see if that's something we could put on. The 20 years was, I think there's 2 reasons for that. And usually the rollbacks, the votes to override it don't have a time limit because the rollback affects it. And so the rollback will affect that 15 mils and it'll go down, and over the course of 20 years, it'll go down anyway. So that's how our charter was started out, right? 15 mils. And then over the course of 20, 30 years, it went down. So a lot of communities don't one reason we put that 20 years was actually to limit the length that the city can do it. Obviously, a lot of people thought it was too long. The other reason was because then you don't have to go back every year and spend the money and resources going back every year. Those were the 2 reasons why we looked into it. I don't think we were dead set on that number. It was just a way to.
Well, there was a rationale behind it, but as with most topics, once you put it out there, you get feedback.
Yeah.
And you find out what people were.
And then the one I heard most is they don't trust us for 20 years. They'll give us a try for 5, but they don't trust us as a council. for
Part of my
20 years.
confusion in this whole process is, and it was actually stated categorically, well, I don't know who's gonna be on council in 5 years, so how can I trust that? Well, we need to take a long view in running the city, or we're never gonna get anywhere. This topic has been kicked down the road already several times, which is why it's become dire. But as far as a 5-year, I believe what we're trying to prepare for is the eventuality when property values go down and the income rate adjusts. We don't know if that's 2 years, 3 years, or 6 years. If we go for a 5-year and it happens in year 6, you're right back to the starting gate. That was part of the rationale behind giving the city, not these 5 people, but giving the city the opportunity to manage its revenue. But we do need an answer to what it is. How long do we need to wait if it's the exact same proposition? Or if it changes significantly, can we go back sooner?
No,
And then what is the history of property values, assessed values in the city? When's the last time they dove?
Jeff, 2012.
So I think predominantly the city of Harley Springs, depending on what area of town you're in, property values are normally consistently increasing. Obviously, we had a situation in 2008 with the housing market crash, which most communities faced. Michigan as a state was one of the harder states hit by that. In looking at our numbers from 2008, obviously it wasn't here at the time, but kind of reviewing some statistical information from that time. As an average, property values in Harbor Springs dropped by between 25 and 30% over about a 3-year time period. From the lack of sales, the foreclosure sales that we saw happening, and then the kind of spiral that created. It took us probably another 3 years from that point for things to flatten out and for us to stop losing value. We then, over the last 3 years, have been recovering that value. I believe that at this point, I think in our last assessing report that I did in April, we showed that we had kind of recovered our assessed value and we were back to where we were prior to 2008. And I think we're even this year going to be making some headway in increasing those values. The important thing, though, to point out in that is when we had that drop in assessed value of 25 to 30% in 2008, as the assessed value lowers, if it gets down to the point of where our taxable value is, the taxable value cannot exceed the assessed. So it pulled that taxable value down. So now the property values have started increasing. Taxable value cannot increase as it would with the market. It's held down by that cost of living increase. So even though we have some areas that are improving very well, we have some that haven't improved quite as much, or where properties have uncapped, the assessed and taxable values are very similar. So if we have a similar situation to 2008 happen today or within the next few years, the taxable value and the assessed values are closer together. And if there's that same 25 to 30% drop in assessed value, it will pull that taxable value further down. So I don't know that will happen, but that's something that we have to be cognizant of if something similar happens again. But typically, other than that, in normal years, we see market increases. Some neighborhoods maybe only 2 to 3% per year. Some neighborhoods that have been doing much better, 15. I think we had some neighborhoods that exceeded 20%, depending on the sales that were going on at that time. Does that help? Sorry if I went above and beyond what you asked for there, but
That helps.
And it took a long time to recover. It goes 2008, we're just now getting back, or a year ago, what's that, 13 years? So that could be a problem with our general fund the way it is now. We probably can't absorb that many years.
And as I understand it, Headley tends, if the property values go up, the millage comes down to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
We're maintaining at a time when material costs are going up, labor costs are going up. So just maintaining, we're going to be in the hole.
And that's where proposal A kicks in and says when values go down, you can't raise your millage rate back up. So that's the nail in the coffin. proposal A really is, even though this is a heavily override vote, it's proposal A, which really ties us. So. So, I mean, it would have been great to have that feedback from residents during the year we've been preparing for this vote about, 5 years, 10 years. Again, no one showed up. So, I mean, you only can go with what we think is the best answer. We looked at other municipalities and what they did. We put a $0.5 restriction in ours, which is most other communities don't do that. And, that was one thing. But, it's what the voters wanted, so.
I guess my question, if I could input here just briefly, it seems from what I've also heard about the time frame, the 20 years. If this Headley ever gets uncapped, overridden, the 20 years doesn't mean anything. It goes to 15. So when that 5 years comes back down, we don't have the authority to put it down to 5. The assumption I'm making in hearing these comments is that the 0.5% a year at 20 years was the catch. So if it was a 0.5% a year for 5 years, I'm assuming that's what they're trying to say, what I'm hearing. Because when you uncap it, it's uncapped. You can't uncap unless you specify uncapped to 6 mils. If it uncaps, it's uncapped until it's driven back down by this process over the next 40 years. So there's
So you can't
different
pick a target that's less.
No,
than-
so say if you want
Sure.
uncapped it to 15, we just levied at that point, then at every budget season, we would say, okay, we need $2.2 million to operate, period. No capital projects. That means we have to levy 6.1 mils to get that break even point. And then anything above and beyond that obviously is a different case. So even though we uncapped it to 15, next year, we could say, you know what, we don't have any big projects, it's just normal operations, we might throw a roof on. We might need 5.9 mils as opposed to the 5.4 we're at now. That's where the control by the taxpayers and the council comes in on what that's going to be every year. But when it's uncapped, it's uncapped. Not for a period of time, it just comes uncapped. So then the sticker would be, okay, we'll put a 5-year period on it of 0.5 mil per year or whatever that then becomes. Then that would have a time frame on it. So I guess I'm not understanding the 20-year concept. I mean, I get it from an outsider looking in and seeing 20 years, but when it comes uncapped, it's uncapped. So then to put a time frame on it would have to be, maybe that 0.5% for 5 years or whatever the case may be.
But if it's uncapped, then after those 5 years, in the budget hearing, you could say, well, this year we want to raise it to 1%. To 1 mil, I mean, right?
Right, then through that
So-
budget hearing, but we cannot levy more than what we need to operate.
Oh, and I understand.
So I mean, just
understand
because we said, okay, we have a $2 million budget and that includes new parking lots. This year it's going to be $2.5 million. We can only levy what is needed that year
Right.
to cover that cost.
So really, the time frame means nothing. In all honesty.
It does, but not in a way I think.
But not in the way people are
taking
thinking
I
about
think
it,
so.
yeah.
I think that's what I'm getting.
I think so too.
Can I ask a question to clarify something? When you state when it uncaps, you're talking about the maximum allowable millage that we would be able to collect, not what we actually would collect.
Correct. It would uncap. So if we said, we just want to uncap it and never put a date in there, we'd still be in the same position.
Mhm.
It would be uncapped. We get 0.5% per year to work with, and that's it. We might not even need that 0.5%.
But each budget, every year,
Every single
is
budget.
subject to
Right.
review, public hearings and approval
Absolutely.
based on a specific plan that we are then held to.
Right, and we gave, Victor and I cannot, it's his budget, but I'm unfortunately behind the scenes more than I want to be, but that will then come to you guys and then you can't just say, well, we have 250,000 or $2.5 million in operations right here in the general fund that needs 6 mils to cover that. We want to do 10.
Yeah, we
That doesn't
can't
work
do
that
that.
way anyway.
Yeah.
Here's what your options are.
And if you assess if you assess the maximum in 1 year for a specific project that's gonna last 2 years, then after that, the millage would come down. Because
Right,
you don't
and-
have that need anymore.
And that's part of the whole Headley thing that Jeff has talked about in the past, is that we're different, not just, I don't mean throw schools out there, but different people that do levy villages, cities, townships, whatever, will say, we want 3 mills for this project. Well, the project gets done. They're still going, we're still collecting money. That's how this all came about. The unintended consequence is, once we get here, the millage cannot go back up.
On the general fund.
And the general fund, and that's the only the street fund as well.
But the street fund is for, again, for specific project
Right. For specific uses.
uses.
And I would say that I get the argument that people don't trust the council, like they don't have general trust for council, they won't raise rates. But that's why there's elections, and if they feel like the council has raised the tax rates, they can vote them out. If the majority don't like what the council's doing, they're out. In 2 years, your rates are back down. So to whatever you want it to be, so. It's democracy.
It's an unpleasant topic, period. And it
It's a
always will
difficult
be.
topic, but it's, you pay for what you get.
Well, and my only fear, and the only reason I brought this to anybody's attention over the last year and a half, is 2008 happened. Hopefully I'm dead and gone when that kind of situation goes again, and you don't have to worry about it, but 30, 40 years from now. But I'm just saying, as you guys in these chairs right now, long visioning is, once you're there, it's kind of tough to say, oh, the economy's horrible, but now let's do this vote. It's just not going to get any better.
It happened way too many times in 2008, 2009, when people were stuck in a situation and tried going back to the voters for a Headley uncapped and say, no way, we don't have money for it.
Right.
So they had to cut a lot of services, a lot of schools got affected, a lot of townships, a lot of cities. It's a tough situation. But so there's the answer, long answer to the Headley question about the Headley. We could go back for, we'd have to look into getting answers from the State Bureau of Elections on when we can go back. But it's still gonna be a tough sell. I don't think it's easy to understand, and some people are just frankly opposed to any tax increase, so.
So I'll be the bad person. I think paid parking is a good idea because it's a long-term solution. I don't think it's going to impact people coming or not coming to Harbor Springs, in all honesty. People pay to park in Petoskey and everywhere else, and they certainly haven't dropped off on their tours. It also shares that expense between the people, not only that live here, but that also come to vacation here. I think that feels like a good match for me. And if we only did it half of the year, the May to October or whatever, it wouldn't impact the year-round residents as much. And I think a number of year-round residents don't drive downtown in the summer anyway, on a regular basis. I certainly don't. I ride my bike or something, So I think that would be one solution that would be workable and also something we could do fairly quickly. So it's my 2 cents.
I agree with you. It's significant revenue to the city. It can be targeted both by cost and by window, and it passes the burden on to the people that are coming to visit and not to the taxpayer.
And those kiosks aren't that big a deal.
No, I think the kiosks are a nice option from meters.
I'll fit right in with the wayfinding signs.
Thanks, Jim.
Excuse me, is there an opportunity for the public to discuss this proposal? Is it at the end or is it now or?
It's after we get done fighting about it.
Thank you.
So that would be my first, the most immediate way. I think there's some other things I like too, but I think that would be the most immediate way to help us generate some more revenue.
I think the parking is fine, or, paid parking is a fine option.
Mhm.
But if we're gonna go to the expense of doing it, I think you need to do it all the time.
Do it year-round.
Year-round.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm fine with that.
But then we have control and we can do that. There could be reduced rates in
Right,
the off season.
yeah, you can make it a penny an hour or whatever.
You can make it whatever you want, turn it on, turn it off. You
Turned off
could-
on
you could
Saturdays and Sundays.
Make
or
it more on
Mondays and
weekends.
Fridays.
I mean, you
Yeah.
have that flexibility to do that.
And I don't think too many people really would object to $1 an hour, just, I mean, as an option. I really don't think we get a lot of pushback on it.
Most people travel all over the place, you go into a parking lot, pull up your app, done. Walk away.
Technology has made it kind of painless. You're not fishing for quarters anymore.
No.
Something to look at.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the specific villages, a Parks and Rec village, or at least people know what they're getting.
Right.
When-
And that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
That was absolutely part of the
They
problem.
feel like they have more control over where the money goes.
Right.
I think, yeah.
A specific millage like that, keep in mind, will also be subject to the Headley override, so that will continue to drop as well, but.
Decrease like all our other villages. From a sales standpoint,
Absolutely.
you know, tell them what they're gonna get.
And I
We're
think, the
gonna do it
public-
to fund Marina Park.
I think it makes a difference. I think the public safety one would be the easiest one to pass.
And those specific villages take pressure off of the general fund.
Correct.
Anyone wants to talk about annexation?
No, not really.
Yeah. Talk all you want.
I would like us to explore some of the zoning stuff though, down the road when we're talking about affordable housing, which is obviously something that's been up here in planning. I think that's something that we need to continue to look at.
I think it's a good topic to discuss, but I can't directly tie it to a revenue stream for the city. It's gonna take more consideration to figure out how you would do that. And significantly, what impact would it have? And how it would tie into the master plan. So I agree, we're talking about, it's a complicated,
It's much more complicated.
another
than paid
complicated
parking. Yes, definitely.
And more density doesn't always mean more revenue.
no, and it can have, I mean, the result of that would be irreversible. There's just, you might end up with something you didn't expect.
Well, the rental program is gonna depend on what the state decides pretty much, right? Or no?
It could, yeah. I mean, it probably, a short-term rental bill would not impact our ability to do a rental program, but you have to look at the specific language. For example, the current bill says you can't treat a short-term rental different than a owner occupied. So in that sense, then if you're gonna have a fee for a short-term rental, you have to have a fee for everyone. So depends on the wording.
Well, those fees cover expenses.
Yes.
So it's
To
not
inspect,
really,
to
it's not a revenue.
It's not a revenue.
It's
It's
not
covered
revenue.
costs, so it's.
You're gonna cover the cost.
We do our
Yeah.
fees
But
are just to
yeah,
cover.
it could cover some of our costs, for example, like enforcement costs, it's the personnel. that
But you're
costs.
back to paying for something that you're gonna
Yeah.
get. There's no net benefit.
Right.
So we want to do that, like you said, it's because you're trying to solve a different problem, not a revenue stream.
Let's back up.
List.
So what do you want from us, then,
Direction on.
besides a drink?
After you get public comment, direction on what for me to further explore.
Public comment, and we can figure it out. Talking about kind of the same page.
I like your hypothetical timeline, the first, item number one. To me, seems like what we've been talking about, to get more detail on and see how it might fit in to the budget this year or next year. That's what I heard.
So look into the public or the paid parking, look into some specific villages.
We'll wait to hear back from the state on the Headley.
Yeah, stay
Right.
ahead.
Even if the specific millage was to be something that somebody was interested in, that's still, be next fall.
Yeah.
But,
The special assessments, we pay, or the city pays for recycling. How difficult is it to put $10 a person on the tax roll?
We can look into it.
I haven't looked into that process, but I mean, it would be $10 special assessment that go on everybody's tax bill.
Yeah, so there's nothing to do.
And it's funny in conversation with people that come in and ask about the Headley thing. There's a fair amount of people in town that don't realize that they have the opportunity for recycles,
Right.
which I wasn't aware of.
Do you know off the top of your head what it costs the city every year for recycling?
32 grand, 35 grand.
Yeah, we have a contract with the County Recycling through 2024, 23.
I would think we could recoup some of that pretty easily. I mean,
Well, what I've seen is we're paying for something maybe that people aren't even using as much as what
yeah,
they, they don't even realize it's an option.
Well, it is, and it's, to go off that, a lot of second homeowners don't use the recycling services in the winter time, right? So they're not here, so they're not even using the service that we're paying for them for.
But that's burdening the people that do use it for the total cost.
Yep.
It's kind of like parking, you're assessing it to each household for user.
Say the one thing that's not on the list is any ideas on how to save some money.
Well, that's gonna come in the budget.
Well, in the budget.
Yeah, reduction in services, yeah. This is revenue we'll talk about.
So we're doing that in the revenue.
When we have a lot of ideas on that.
It's gotta be a combination, I think. Give and take to get something we want.
Yep.
All right, you have enough direction?
I don't, but you want to get public comment first, probably.
Mr. Cassidy, yes.
Thank you. My name is Jim Cassidy. We have a home on 493 Harrison in Harbor Springs here. I've not been to a lot of the meetings in 18 or so years that we've been contributing to the city coffers. But I have attended a workshop, I guess you'd call it, for lack of a better word. I believe you're involved in that, and some of the council were regarding the short-term rentals. So I've had 2 meetings. So forgive me if I'm ignorant to a lot of this. I haven't had the opportunity to get involved. But so here we are. I guess, Victor, the biggest thing that I'm kind of troubled about is you had that blazing blue 98% up there. Yeah, the Harbor Springs, the essence of it is that there's 98% more cities where homestead taxes are higher than they are here. Is that what it is?
98% of cities residents pay more combined city, county, and school millage rate than Harbor Springs residents. So yeah,
Well, that Harbor Springs has about 65% non-homestead, right?
correct.
So that's a really skewed number.
No,
And we're-
well,
Oh, it's not?
no, it's because the city itself doesn't collect the non-homestead tax that goes to the schools. We don't collect that money.
But I would think that there's probably of those 98% of the cities out there, people live in cities where it isn't skewed, that 34% or so of the people are homesteaded. So, I mean, it's kind of a moot point.
I can add some to this. So homestead versus non-homestead property taxes. A non-homestead resident pays up to 18 mils in school taxes. That's the only thing that the homestead exemption gets you. In Harbor Springs, I think that's closer to about 15 mils.
It's 13.
Is it 13? Okay, yeah, so that's
A little bit less than 13.9. That's also subject to the Headley Millage too.
correct, yeah, and I think it's 6.9 or 7.9 split between or on each summer and the winter bill. But so that statistic, I don't think would change hardly at all. Because when you go to any other community, looking at that same ratio of homestead to non-homestead, you're going to be looking at that same exemption of up to 18 mils of school taxes. So there's not going to be that fluctuation. And even if there is, where we have higher percentage of people that are paying at the non-homestead rate, it doesn't affect the amount of money that comes to the local municipality.
I gotta get my head around that one, so we'll get into that. I'll look into that.
If you want to discuss it more outside of the meeting, feel free to contact me.
I will do that. Thank you for your help. A couple other things I have, if I can just rattle off here, we got my big piece of paper here. Basic services, basic services in my interpretation don't include like activities at a park. or games at a park, or things of that nature. Basic city services, in my vision, and I'm just one person who can't vote, by the way, because we don't live here full time, but is like the water and the city and the police and the fire and, you know, the infrastructure of the sewer and the water, the utilities, which are all great. You guys do a great job. I'm all the time giving attaboys to the DPW crews. And everybody in the city hall has been very helpful to us over the years. So we're grateful to be a part of the community in that regard. But bike paths, I mean, and activities at a park, I don't think we should be looking to you and to people who don't live here year round to pay for that. I think that, as you point out, Victor, I know this is revenue conversation expense. And Matt, you picked up on that. Thank you for being of that mindset. I don't think that should be in here where we're planning on trying to cover the cost of extras. As families and businesses, and there's business owners around the table here, I know at least 4. And when we have shortcomings in our, like, for example, my mortgage brokerage that went bye-bye in 2007 before the crash, we had to make some changes. We had to cut some things. And these businesses all go through the same thing. I'm sure that the New York didn't do as well the years after as the ride up, electing to get a new driveway versus living with the gravel driveway. So I really think we gotta operate this like a kitchen table a little bit more than how do we keep up with expenses rather than how do we cut expenses. And I know that's another conversation. I just hope you're very mindful of it, because I look at it from a different side of the glass of water. The other question I had is the TIFA authority. How is that funded? I saw it as a line item up here in a percentage of the general fund. Should that be funded by the businesses or property owners in the TIFA district?
The TIF district is money that the DDA captures. So that's
Who pays it?
those in that TIF district,
Right,
the downtown businesses.
Right. So, but it looked like it was part of the general fund. And again, I could be wrong. 56-year-old eyes, even though that screen's nicer to read than that one, I probably still could have missed it.
No, it's not part of the general fund. It's not on here.
It's not. Okay, good. One thing I think might be a helpful thing for revenue, because that's really the topic here tonight. And this kind of was touched a little bit when they were talking in that meeting for the short-term rentals. Like, oh, properties might not be safe. They could have carbon monoxide. They could have, asbestos blowing around the house and hurt these guests, or maybe our neighbors even. A lot of the communities across the state have an inspection on every property when it transfers ownership. And some of them, like Grosse Pointe Woods, for example, I used to live there, but I don't any longer. When a property was held for long-term rental, like month to month or year lease, if you will, it had to have an inspection prior to the people moving in. It was pretty painful because, that light switch was fine last year, nothing happened to it. Now all of a sudden it's not proper wiring or ground fault, so they could get back at that and call the electrician. But if your tenant left before the term of the contract was up, guess what? Another inspection. And I'm not for like penalizing people that are trying to make a buck and invest, but that would help our community. It would make the properties more appealing when they traded. People would have to know their house would have to be up to snuff, or somebody have to sign some type of an agreement to be responsible within 6 months afterwards and post a bond to get there. So that might be a nice revenue driver that benefits the people. And then the other thing I keep hearing is affordable housing. I don't know how, again, that doesn't seem to me as something that the city should be worrying about or trying to solve that problem. I believe that's just pure economics, I'd love to be in Mar-a-Lago. I can't even say it. I'm never going to be there, but it's just not in the cards for me. And at the end of the day, that's how it works. And the free market's going to figure out who lives where and what they can earn and participate in the economy, in the service economy or professional economy accordingly. So I'm not sure when you say affordable housing is part of, something to consider here, what does that mean? We're trying to fund the development of affordable housing and
I don't think affordable housing was included in our revenue.
it was discussed here tonight.
A council member mentioned it, but I didn't. put it in the revenue.
It was actually on your presentation, the wording was there, but I don't know. In
So I
what
just wondered about
relationship,
that.
but it was there, I just don't know what relationship.
Yeah, I don't think that should be anything we're discussing unless.
It's not responsibility.
Oh,
There's nothing free. Somebody's got to pay for it.
that was a response to what the residents wanted in the public
Oh,
surveys.
that's what it was.
They showed that they wanted the city to do more for affordable housing. So we did these public surveys, which had probably between 150 and 400 responses at the most for some of the surveys, showing what the community wanted. And that's where that list came from here about,
Yeah, I'd like it to be affordable for people to work in different jobs here, but it's just, who wants to take a piece of land and develop it and say, I want to make about 40% of what I could otherwise make on this land by building this limited structure or finishes to it. And I just don't know how that quandary gets solved in the chambers of the city council. So those are my concerns. Thank you for taking the time to let me speak tonight.
Maggie Lacey, 315 East Third Street. So looking at the presentation, thank you for putting together, and you put a lot of work into it. But 57% of the general fund is by property taxes. Where if you compare Petoskey, so you're comparing other cities, so I went with Petoskey, it's 36%, actually 37.3, but so they're kind of really balanced out the way they're bringing revenue. And one of them is, I think we all have to really look at, and it was brought up and it was one of your easier to accomplish, and that is the grants, okay? So in 2020, Petoskey gained over 450,000 in grants. In 2021, they gained over 450,000 in grants. And I think this goes back to making sure that we have our guiding light of the master plan, because you have to have the vision in the master plan for the grants to be able to go through. And that has to be rolled up from the planning commission of what the vision is. And so when you do apply for those grants, you actually get it. And so instead of putting the revenue in parks or recreation, maybe the revenue should have been in having a grant writer to start creating revenue for the city of Park Springs. So normally as a business owner, when I bring on a overhead of an employee, I have to make sure that employee pays for itself and then some. And so I look at the revenue that we're spending a lot out and not a lot in. So if I was going to really look at this and compare, I'm going to go back to East Jordan, City of East Jordan. For their DDA group, they received $370,000 last year. So there's money out there to be had, but I think it comes down to how well you can write these grants. And that comes down to mind flexing and doing it often and making sure that our master plan is done and all the way down. From my understanding, that's what I've been investigating, understanding, and being told. So if other towns can do it, I know that we can do it. So I would say that we really need to be flexing our brain power around that and getting organized. Also, I know that we're looking at the budget in December, but Petoskey's already done with their budget in August. Like we can look at and review. So I just pulled it up. Well, the only reason I'm saying that is because you have people in town that actually can give feedback on the budget that's here in August. That would be my only other feedback, because you can only have so many people giving you ideas, and maybe there's another solution that someone else can provide. For instance, we have property at the airport. I know Petoskey rents out their mobile home area, right? That's creating revenue service. We have that airport property. Have we ever thought of thinking about a way to create revenue off that that's reoccurring revenue? I mean, I'm just thinking about that. I mean, that's top of mind right now. But maybe there's a brainstorm, but I think that, if we're looking at the grants and the donations and bonds, no one's mentioned a bond. I know we just paid off a bond, I believe, right? For the police department.
we're still paying it off.
We're still paying it off. What was the interest rate on that?
Nick, you have that?
No, not off the top of my head. I can get up.
Are interest rates low right now for bonds?
It depends on the municipality that's requesting and their fiscal health.
Okay, and I think that, when we come down to projects, as you said, are we paying for affordable housing? Are we paying for, certain things? I mean, doing the park and recreation, that gives people access, but it's the wear and tear of our town. We have to be able to make sure that we're maintaining our infrastructure because we're really getting some wear and tear. So going back to what you were saying, what should we be responsible for? We look to the infrastructure and safety. So yep, safety millage, I understand why that would be a benefit, okay? But overall, if we go back to the Headley, one of the reasons why maybe the project, and we're probably going to talk about it tonight because we're talking about the boardwalk of safety. If you go back to the history of that boardwalk, that was a topic that started in 2017. We went 18 months. We did multiple renditions. We did bids on it. We had surveys. We got a date that we were going to do it. We found the money for it, but then we did the FEMA, right? FEMA came up and we had a deadline. Well, that's not a problem. We knew we needed to do FEMA. That was the right thing to do, but it was specific, measurable, attainable, and a timeline that was given. Now with the boardwalk, we're now sitting 4 years later and we don't have anything to show for it. Now we're saying it's a safety issue. We've had 4 years of doing, yeah.
That's a different
Okay.
subject.
Okay.
You want to discuss
Well,
any
it
of
goes-
this? that we
It goes
just had?
back to that, saying that, we could actually have raised, and now we wouldn't be having to worry about some of these funding issues that we're up against.
You should set up a foundation and raise the money for us. We would appreciate your help with that.
I would love to.
All right. Anyone else have anything?
I just have a comment about the concerns that I'm seeing. Reading articles in the paper, the messaging was a bit disturbing following the election. Because the messaging that came to the public, me being one of the public, was that the community didn't understand, that we didn't have a basic understanding of comprehensive tax laws. And I've talked to a lot of people around town as well concerning this because it's very much a hot topic. But I think one of the confusions that come about is the formulas that go into millages. So when you're speaking about a 0.692 millage, perhaps it might have been better communicated to the public to say that that specific millage rate applied against $1,000 would show up as this specific dollar amount. I think people didn't have a clear concept of what that millage rate after that tax
We did that.
equation.
That was out
We
there.
put that all out there.
That was
On
out
our
there in
website,
charts
on our
and stuff.
presentation,
Where was that?
on our website, on different homepage, on the budget page.
There was something that said specifically this millage rate
Yes.
applied to this many thousands of dollars
Yep.
would affect your taxes by this specific dollar amount.
That's.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
In the presentation that Victor did here twice, I think.
Twice I did it at city council.
That at an open meeting, those charts were there.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I did not get any feedback that indicated that that had been done, and that was just a thought that I had. But perhaps that would communicate the message better. So it sounds like you did diligence on that. That's awesome. Parking, I just want to address parking. I think that's a brilliant idea because it does generate an immediate income. It does pass the burden on to everybody that's using the streets and the infrastructure. And I think it's brilliant. I stand behind that 100%.
Rick Morrill from the far eastern suburbs of Harbor Springs. As far as the bike paths go, it's not just locals that use that a lot. If you look at, drive down 119 in the summer, and you see that hundreds of people on the bike paths, and that's probably 80% of them are summer residents and vacationers. So that's a good thing, for the bike paths. And as far as affordable housing goes, aside from a humanitarian standpoint, the businesses still need affordable housing for employees. I'd love to go to Amachi, Mumbai and dine in, but the guy just can't get help because one of the big reasons is affordable housing and the lack thereof. So business owners in Harbor really need affordable housing. Thank you.
What else? Perfect. Moving on.
Yes.
You can vote on that or just guidance?
No, what I'll do is I'll bring back some recommendations and options and then can vote on it at another meeting. And that way it'll go in the public and public will have more opportunity to also come speak about that. It'll be on the agenda. All right, the boardwalk assessment and options. So at the October 18th council meeting, when council meeting I wasn't here at, council asked DPW Director Lucas to update council on the condition of the boardwalk. Lucas prepared the following report as attached here, showing the deteriorating conditions of the boardwalk and recommending that it be closed to the public until major repairs can take place. I reviewed that I reviewed the report as I was preparing my council packet last week and decided that based on his recommendation to be closed immediately, that I close it immediately. The boardwalk, we've been talking about that since 2016. In 2017, they gave, 1 to 2 years or 3 to 5 years. Both those terms were turned out as safety. They said the structure was undermined. The safety was a big issue. It wasn't a surface level issue, it was a structural issue. And they said 3 to 5 years at most of life into it. So that generated council, it's been almost 5 years now to reassess the boardwalk and see if it should be closed. And Lucas will show you as we go through the pictures that there's some significant structural issues with that. And the liability is too great to the city to continue keeping that open. It doesn't mean that it was safe last week or last month or last year. Doesn't mean that if we didn't close it, that someone would injure themselves next week or the week after or the month after. However, the risk is too great to continue keeping it open. This is, unfortunately, there's been some suggestion out there that this was a reaction to Headley, and this is not a reaction to Headley. It's a reaction to a council request to look at safety of the boardwalk. And a reaction to Headley is looking at revenue raising options and cuts to the budget. So that is a reaction to Headley. That is a result of failure. This is not. This is a result of council asking staff to look at the safety of the boardwalk. So Lucas, I don't know if you want to walk through some of the pictures or your assessment here.
I think it's fairly straightforward. If anyone has any questions, if you want to go through, if anyone wants to ask anything, feel free. I can try to give you as much information as possible about anything that may or may not be clear.
What would you say are the main issues with the boardwalk, the structure?
I think the biggest reason the reason that I felt compelled to give the opinion that it should be closed down is basically the support structure and mechanisms that are underneath it. When you start crawling around under this, and when you're on top of it, you don't see any of it. When you start to traverse the side of the hill and try to get close to other things, it becomes very evident that this is in very poor condition. But I wouldn't advise anyone to try to go on either. And you can see from the pictures, all this used to be straight. So the structure is shifting in all sorts of different places because the supports are failing. And that's why you have all the unstraight handrails, and you can't really tell from the pictures, but there's dips in the surface. It's just, like I said, that's one of the supports. It used to be completely on that piece of concrete, and now it's got about an inch before it falls off. And this is on the good section, on the west side. The first part of it is here. That's the observation deck, which again, that picture is taken from above. You can't really tell, but it literally is pushing out between 6 and 8 inches, where the concrete support underneath it is literally just blowing out.
That's under the siren up there, ain't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see the concrete there's tipping. That's why there's not flush on there. This is on the east side headed to Gardner. And again, that used to be straight, and you can see how far it has shifted in this area, even with some of the, cabling and support and things like that.
So there was a determination about 4 years ago that it was undermined then. And compare a few, well, we didn't put the pictures from back then on here, but there has been significant change and shifting, and even from when they took the pictures several years ago, so. A lot of shifting has happened, and it's really, so a lot of people think it's safe because there's not really anything visibly wrong at the surface. And that's because DPW, they fix those, when those things happen, they come and replace a board here and there, that's not the problem. But it's the structure, it's underneath, that's the issue. No. And tying our cables to dead trees, it's to stumps, it's not safe.
Well, one of the things I noticed is the cables that used to be taut are broken, and some of them are now slack. So there are clear signs of the fact that the hillside shifted, that not the hillside, but the boardwalk is shifting on the hillside.
So that's that. So the boardwalk will be closed until we can find a solution to it. And the solutions could be, there could be look at a redesign or a partial rebuild of it and not the entire thing. Look at a different type of build, look at different ways to raise money for it. We're looking at grants. I know Rachel, that's why she's doing that RRC training to see if MEDC will give some money for this, because MDOT said no, DNR said no. So donations, yes, we can do that, but we'd have to first see, our original cost went up. I mean, it was slated to be about $500,000, $450,000 to $500,000. That was back in early 2018, mid 2018. Lumber prices went up, COVID resources, supply chain issues happened, and then when we came back early this year for estimate back, I believe in May, benchmark was saying anywhere between $650,000 and $700,000 for that design.
That's conservative.
And that was conservative. So that put even a bigger dent into this issue. So that's why we so we could save, we could not do small projects here and there. We could not do a small park like a pickleball courts or something, save $25,000 a year. You'll never get to the price that we originally intended to be about 20, 30 years. So that's why we need to look at other revenue sources or change the design or do a partial build.
Is the bluff itself sloughing off? I mean, it looked like there was more than just the wood shifting on both piles.
There's a combination of things, especially with, and it was pointed out back in 2017 when we initially did some investigation there, because that boardwalk as it is designed creates a rain shadow and also a sun shadow. There's no vegetation underneath it at all. So, but there's still rain and water running down the bluff. So that's why there's a lot of the exposed concrete and things like that, because there's nothing to hold in place.
And there was no agreement when this was last discussed as to which construction technique would be used.
Wood, to the best of my knowledge.
There were several different conclusions.
Yeah, I found it in the
changed
paper.
several times.
Yeah, there were a lot of different ones.
It's changed over the years.
The bid package that went out that I looked at is for treated. And there were 3 different options for railings.
Right.
But the base construction was all treated lumber.
It's basically recreated the way it is now, and then there were 3 different railing options.
I believe there might have been some aluminum or other type of substructure.
Yeah, it was a steel understructure.
Steel understructure, wood tread, and wood railing.
And I actually did reach out to the bottom 3. One's not in business anymore. The other one did return a call. The middle one returned a call. And if we are interested in this again, he would like to look at it again. So.
I think.
So I was just curious. So I reached out.
And
the alternative would be, given the social media bullshit that's went on the past few days, is to look at, basically, everybody wants a way down from the high school to downtown. So consider at a lesser cost, we can just look at stairway straight down with a landing. Cover Bridge just did a beautiful, upgrade up there, not only the bridge, but the pathway down to the beach. No issue. I mean, every so often there's cutouts, where people could sit, rest, whatever. So, instead of $750,000 or $1 million, probably, the way costs are going, we could look at 200,000, let's say, roughly. So we can look at some options, maybe we don't just do from the Siren downtown, we go from Gardner straight up too. So there'd be 2 access points, but get rid of everything in the middle.
Less maintenance too.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, there's some different design options to lessen our cost, and then we don't have to wait. Then we can look at some different ways of funding and stuff like that. So, but otherwise, I mean, talking to one contractor, he said things aren't getting cheaper. So, I mean, when you spend $1 million, $750,000, it's not going to get cheaper. People want an access point from point A to point B, then it's stairway down the steps.
And that seemed to be the main focus. I was a little surprised.
Yeah.
Was I need to get from the top to the bottom and back up again. Yeah.
That's the safety for the kids. I mean, I agree.
No, I
Some
get
of the
it.
concerns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
And that could be a very attractive solution at a much lower cost.
and forgive me, the city doesn't own that property, right?
Right.
Isn't it? It's leased property option.
We only
So,
own where the stairs are. That's our right of way.
The Spring Street right of way goes from where it is on top of the bluff to where it is on the left. So just straight down. So just a few different little pieces of it are actually on city right of way.
right.
The rest is all
Private property.
private property.
So that makes it easier if we looked at an option to go straight over the hill, straight down. Makes it easier on the city. Just my 2 cents on it.
Well, that's a good thought,
But,
John.
and
Yeah.
it's time to explore alternatives.
Because we can't. There's no way it's gonna be like the Harbor Master Building.
No,
It's never gonna happen.
Right.
we need to make it happen.
I mean, the public outcry, is for something to get done. So,
A rope ladder. Give them a rope ladder.
pretty much,
Zip line.
bring aerial truck in, let it be a zip line. So
We could charge for that.
we could.
New revenue.
Revenue streams. I like it.
Well,
So,
if we did it in wood, like some of the folks with it that have the memories of it, I think that's entering into this too, from what I'm reading and hearing out there. So if we did something that looked similar in terms of construction materials and looked old fashioned, so it didn't look like a new modern structure, but came a lot straighter with a landing to whatever. Maybe that would be a good compromise.
So do we
Good idea, John.
have Benchmark look at it first, or do we contact
Well, we'd eventually need to have an engineer
engineering?
option, but if that's the direction council wants to go.
right now, I'm just doing a little legwork to
Yeah,
save on engineering fees. But when it came down to it, we need to go that route.
Well, I say if we called one of the contractor, if we could get a contractor to come look at it, he might have some ideas before we start engineering it.
Well, if the middle bidder on the original design is willing to come and take a look at it, and you talk to him about that option, he might give us an idea.
Yeah, he said that option was mumbled, but was never an actual consideration.
yeah, it was this, I went back through the minutes and the Harbor Light articles on this, and it was briefly mentioned about doing straight up, but it wasn't seriously discussed at the council table.
Well, it might be beneficial if the same guy could come to say, okay, to do it like it is now, it would cost X amount. To do a straighter shot, it would cost X amount, because I think for the public to know the difference between those and us, but would might make a big difference. If it's a savings of a third to, 2/3, it might make a big difference. Because they're anxious to get it done.
Public comment, maybe we have some, I think. on here.
Public comments. That does seem the most physically feasible, financially feasible option, the stairs going straight down. But I would consider rebuilding the observation deck, because that is such a beautiful spot to view across the bay, across the Petoskey, the harbor. You
100%
not the
agree on
same
that.
footprint,
Yeah.
maybe make it a little bigger, but still have a little observation deck up there. It's really nice.
Yeah, makes sense.
Rick Tershinsky, we said, could infrastructure bill monies be used to repair Boardwalk? Potentially, maybe, I'd have to look at the details there. We could also potentially use some of the street millage sidewalk funds that we have to go to it. I don't think we can use our American Rescue Act funds for that. That probably only can be used, I'll get to this at our budget discussion meetings, but that probably only can, for our purposes, be used for water, sewer, because we haven't been negatively affected financially by COVID, even though we've been negatively affected by other things, but not by COVID. So anyway, but yes, Rick, yes, we probably, but we'd have to look into details.
So just the other side of the story with regards to going straight up, I walk it every day, and even going straight up, you get out of breath. So, I mean, we're all at different ages that use that boardwalk, and I would just want to consider the reason why that transition is there. It kind of gives people a break to go back up to the next level. So that's something to consider versus doing a straight up stairs.
Also, I'm talking about there's platforms
Okay.
going up, probably 2 in that distance.
And I believe aren't there easements that were in place for the property? Even though we don't own the property, the easements are in place?
There are no easements on
No
that
easements.
property, no. But the city has a right to be there, but they're not physically recorded.
We have a right by use, but we don't have an actual recorded easement, like Jim was saying. We looked into this early this year.
So is that one of the reasons why, or we talked to the property owners about this?
Well, problem is if we try to do some kind of different construction, we can't go beyond those based on the rights by use beyond 6 feet that we have there. So to do some certain construction designs would entitle us doing more work on the bluff that's not what we have a right to use. So we'd have to probably go to all the owners to get permission or some sort of agreement. So, and I know there are some who probably might not like it, so.
And one thing in considering the structure and redoing it, and I like John's idea about making it less complicated because of the shifting of the bluff and what we've been seeing, and even in the 7 years that I've been here and how much it's shifted. My concern, if you rebuilt with the way that the hill's been shifting now, could we not be back in this exact same position in, an X amount of time with the way that the hill's been shifting? And I think it would be less likely with 2 access points instead of the way that it goes up now. Maybe it wouldn't be so subject to the shift that we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, that's a good point. That'd be a good question for our engineers when we do get something is.
Most of that, between the vehicles that would get driven in modern technology with the straight, a lot of the weight distribution would be anchored at the base.
That's what I was thinking, just so, like we've talked a lot about in the other meetings, whatever we do, making sure that it's the best last for the amount of money that's going to be spent. As much as I love the winding boardwalk, I take it all the time. I just would rather see it living in the city that it's going to be something that we're not going to be here because it shifts again.
I would like to see less than 5 years to reach a resolution.
Well,
5 years.
Working on it.
I realize that government and the processes take a long time, but given that this has already taken 5 years and the public's reaction to the closing now, I think it would be really amenable to address the public's attitude towards council, maybe improve public's attitude towards council if things move much more quickly now that it's been closed.
We'll try to work I think we'll try to move as fast as we can, but it comes down to money. I mean, we don't have the money. So,
well, I'm all for somebody, Maggie, for someone working on donations and do what we can. I mean, we've,
Well,
there's
we
been
put a plan
5
in
years.
place, now once
Once
we
we
get a
have a
plan in place.
concept.
Right, there's been 5, but well, I guess what I'm trying to say is from the time of 2016, when this was first explored, till now, if that had been going on in tandem with the budget that was set aside, perhaps funds would be there for this right now.
FEMA took $1 million from us. That's building.
No, I'm talking about donations specifically for that, not money that would have been budgeted, but donations could have worked tandem, donations, grants, whatever, could have been working in tandem with that so that the money would be there today. So I see that as a lost opportunity. I wasn't on council, not second guessing you. That's just what I'm seeing from the sidelines. And I realize that forest trees, et cetera, but that's just what I'm seeing. So I'm just saying if something could be done more quickly, it might improve public relations with council.
Hi, I'm Allison Larson and I live at 255 East Bluff. I'm at the top of the boardwalk. And for the ownership of the land from Spring Street to the high school, my neighbors and I each own our own parcels. So there's 4 houses from Spring to the high school. A couple of things, the observation deck, I think when you're rebuilding is key. The school uses it a lot of times they have classes there and it's great, another opportunity for the kids to get out. I have an 11-year-old son and he and his buddies take it every day, you know, up and down. Some kids use it to get to and from school. It's not safe for the kids to cross at 119 and State. The stop sign is prior to the crosswalk, but very seldom do cars stop at the stop sign. They roll right into the crosswalk. So now the kids will have to take Judd Hill, which isn't ideal, but it's better than taking the 119 crossway. So it is a safety issue for kids in this town because this town is so family friendly and accessible to kids to have some sort of revision of a boardwalk so they can get to and from town and to and from school for the kids who live below the block and walk to school.
Pam Tarczynski, 465 State Street. If the boardwalk is such a big service to the kids, then wouldn't school budget realistically something at least contribute a percentage of it? If it's a major conduit, is that one possible source of at least a percentage of the funding?
They probably have to do some type of a millage and then gain some type of a legal lease on the property, similar to how they lease the athletic fields from the city. They couldn't spend any public tax money on that until we had a long-term lease set up with them to allow them to actually use any millage money for the schools on property that they do not own.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Good idea.
Victor, didn't you say there's one more organization to check for grant money for the boardwalk yet?
MEDC.
And how does that look?
Well, we have to be engaged in the RRC project, which is next, our RRC communities program, which is next on our list. And I don't know, they are, Rachel, maybe you can talk to that a little bit, but we haven't really specifically gotten to the boardwalk with them, but they are willing to do anything that promote economic development.
Yeah, so there are cities in the state of Michigan, Petoskey is actually enrolled in it, gets enrolled every 5 years through the membership. And it's about redeveloping businesses and downtown areas in general. So, and there's no stipulation on how long it takes to get through the process. Because it can take a very long time if we're going to master plan, things like that. But as long as you're engaged and you have a staff member who's taking the trainings and the community's working towards it, you can apply for those grants and things that are fundamental to your downtown area.
Do we know why we were rejected from DNR and MDOT?
MDOT said that they were looking for grants, to give grants out for more pedestrian and bicycle facilities along state or major roads. So that's why they told us the bike path would be a good option, but not, DNR just said did not fit their current grants that they have. So it wasn't as long of a conversation with them, but MDOT, I got through a bit of the process, several months of talking, and then they said, no, it's not a good idea. Don't bother applying. So
I still think that given the public outcry on this, a lot of people have a lot of fond memories, as you said, talking about that. So I still think that there's a good donation base there too, and a fundraising base that could be tapped.
I agree once we have a plan.
Once we get a plan together.
Died.
Somebody go grab one?
No.
Okay. There, anyone else comment on the boardwalk?
Thank you, John, for being proactive.
Back up yet. I don't think there's any comments on Zoom, on YouTube.
Next.
All right, thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
All right, so Marina Park structure, review the structure and or create a parks board. So Councilmember Rondell had asked, I think, to kind of relook at the Marina Parks structure to see who's still on it, because we have a lot of turnover there. So when Rachel here, and she can talk a little bit more about it, but basically, you know, we're thinking about transitioning the Marina Parks Committee to Parks and Recreation Board overall. There are about a dozen parks in the city of Harbor Springs, as well as other amenities and facilities. And Boardwalk can be part of that, bike path. All need attention, commitment, and planning. Our Kiwanis building is 5 decades old. Ford Park building is 5 decades old. So we have a lot of buildings that are old, a lot of planning and investment needs to go into them to maintain them and to update them. So the Marina Park Committee was designed, this was created essentially to look at short-term, long-term solutions. We kind of got short-term solutions done pretty quickly, you know, some landscaping, some tables there, a lot of donated tables. We got some games. So we kind of made the space a little more fun space, more interactive space for summer. But there's also the main reason for setting up the Marina Park Committee was a long-term goals. However, with the funding situation and the options it's not looking like we're gonna do anything in the next couple of years as far as structure-wise goes on Marina Park. There might be grants available, there might be other options, but it still looks like it's probably gonna be a couple of years. So I think we should also be looking at the same time as looking at other parks and doing planning for there and seeing what we can do there. And a parks board would definitely help in planning purposes and recreation programming and improvements and maintenance there. And it could be a benefit. So while we're also doing the Marina Park, we're also looking at other parks at the same time. So if that's the direction council wants to go, I know Rachel, if you want to talk more on that, or that basically sums it up, but.
That basically sums it up. I don't know how much everyone knows about grants, but you cannot apply for DNR grants without a parks master plan. So that kind of ties our hands in the grant. I've done 2 DNR grants, I believe fully in grants. But I think that working with the parks board will get the community more involved. It lets them come to meetings and discuss the master plan as it's going on. And like Victor said, it opens it up to our other parks that also are in need of a lot of attention.
So I don't know if council remembers, not all of you were on council, but when we did the waterways grant for the Harbor Master Building, we had to create a waterfront parks plan. So that was why it took so long in the first place, was we had to spend so much time doing that. So to apply for non-waterfront park grants, you have to do the DNR, you have to have a parks plan. So anyway, it's our recommendation that we bring back to council, that council asks us to bring back a plan for transitioning the Marina Park Committee into a parks board, and then actually look at, you know, what the membership would be, et cetera. I think it's overall going to be much more beneficial than just a committee that's focused on a Marina Park that, you know, may be moving more slowly than anticipated at first because of the long-term, the funding issues for any potential structure there.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Makes sense.
Consolidate.
I agree. I mean, that little committee did a hell of a job.
Yeah, sure. Keep players from that Marina Park Committee, put them on a parks board. Would be good.
Yeah, I wouldn't automatically transition everybody on Marina Park to the other. I'm gonna check and make sure they wanted that.
Right.
And I think a council member should be on that parks board.
Just like we have on all the other boards, yeah. And this, I think we'd probably do something, maybe Jim, either by ordinance or resolution that.
I think an ordinance, we should actually create it as, it's an official board of the city. It's an article.
Support.
Yeah, all right, well, then I'll come back to.
We saw benefits from the tree board.
Yep.
Became formalized. I think the same will happen here.
And we have staff to staff it, and we have staff that will work on the plan and grants to be associated with that. So I think as of now, you see in 3F, the same reason why we want to restart the RRC committee, because grant money. Yeah. All right, well, I'll go forward on that.
Question?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm hearing Marina Park and Parks and Recreation boards and streets and safety and everything else. Where exactly, just to take it back for 1 second so I have full comprehension, where exactly does the boardwalk fit in any of these particular pockets?
It's both. It's the general fund, which is our Parks and Recreation, but it's also the streets, which covers streets and sidewalks. So, it depends on, we can basically put the boardwalk into both of those categories as streets and the general fund, which is Parks and Recreation is part of it. So.
And does it require a special approval from council to do fundraising, to do donation drive?
Yes, so council is the authority, they oversee the budget. So if we're going to ask for money, it needs to have their blessing. So, yeah.
Also, just to kind of pinpoint the Parks Master Plan, like the reason when Victor probably reached out about the boardwalk to DNR, it might have fit a grant in parks, but they wouldn't have to apply for it. So with the Parks Master Plan completed, we would be able to go back to DNR and say, now it doesn't fit, and maybe it doesn't, but that would be a possibility if we decided to go that route.
And our parks plan is from 1993, so it is outdated as not, so.
Can you get grants from the DNR and then another source? It doesn't have to just be from one.
It doesn't have to be from one. You can mix and match. Again, though the success rates aren't tortuously high. So, like for example, we did a grant for the solar array, and actually the reason we got rejected for that grant for the solar panels for our buildings was because we asked for too much money. They knocked us down points for asking for more money. We asked for 2/3 of the cost, and they knocked us down points for that. It was ridiculous, but.
Having been in sales forever, I learned two things. One, you don't get what you don't ask for. And two, half of something or a portion of something is better than nothing at all. So probably should explore all the possible options that we could pull together to package this together as quickly as possible and still be equitable for everyone.
Wonder would it possibly come under the new infrastructure bill that they just passed? There's gobs of money for different things there. Maybe get our federal or Washington level representatives to help us with that.
A lot of that infrastructure bill, I'll look into more details, but a lot of it is to do with basic infrastructure. I mean, you're talking about streets, water, sewer. I'll look at the details. There might be some options there, but.
This might be a unique situation that might fall in there somewhere. It's a good.
It may. I mean, we've looked at other ones. Like I studied the American Rescue Act because I was hoping we could spend the monies from the American Rescue Act on this, but we can't. I mean, there's no way we can do it. So I'm trying to fit it in. So yes, in a way, I'll look into it, but it's not. I don't think it's likely that it will be, but I'll look into it.
Next.
All right, redevelopment ready communities committee. I'll make it short. We had started this in 2019 as a way to kind of improve some of the processes here, but as well as to be eligible for certain grants. Of course, COVID hit. We also didn't have staff that didn't want to at that time kind of take the lead on this. So we were kind of limited to who could do this and how we could do it. So staff had other priorities. RRC kind of fell by the wayside. Rachel's back. Well, Rachel's here. She wasn't gone when I'm back, but Rachel's here and she's took the training. She's willing to help co-lead the RRC committee with me. So we can, we want to reignite this, but we're gonna have to look at who's on it. I mean, there's a lot of people that probably don't even know that they're still on it or not, because we haven't met in a while. So I think by 2022, January, start the RRC meetings up again. Maybe I'll come back to council in December, just like with a Parks Board ordinance, but maybe just,
So, but the basis to that is, I mean, you already got it, right?
Yep, we already have it. So council needs to commit, I think, by a vote here, saying that they want to re-engage the RRC process. We never stopped it, we paused it, but we have a couple new council members that are on here that weren't here when we started the RRC program. So it would be good for the RRC, the MEDC to see that our council is still committed to it, even after the long delay.
Well, I think we should get it going again.
I agree. There's value then, and I think there's value now.
Is that a motion in a second?
Is that a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to fire it back up. How's that?
I'll second that motion.
Might as well do a roll call since we've only done one tonight, so. John Leo,
Yes.
Al Legga,
Yes.
Matt McGarrett,
Yes.
John Cubs.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
motion carried.
Is there discussion on this topic? Is it too late?
No, you can ask questions.
I'm just curious, that this particular program doesn't readdress zoning and multi-density interest into a community. It doesn't inject any of that, doesn't touch any of those topics, right?
This does not force the city to do anything, but
But does it open the door to those?
it opens the doors to all kinds of things. Improving our processes. It also asks us, I mean, Rachel just took a test today.
Yeah, it does open doors, but it doesn't force anything on the community. There's no like, you have to do this to be, it's basically like a best practice.
Yeah.
And you go through zoning and you go through economic development and you're downtown and you say, is this all best practice? So that's why they say it takes multiple years. A lot of communities, it takes about 2 years to get through the process as a whole.
So my concern is a possible end result of this then changing density?
That we don't need RRC to change density. The Master Planning Commission and Council can do that whenever they want after a hearing. So
Okay.
that can happen regardless of this process.
RRC would not supersede planning commission,
No.
ZBA, or any of the.
Thank you.
So at a lot of the planning classes that I go to, they talk about redevelopment stuff. One key factor in becoming a redevelopment ready community is transparency with the public. So one thing that they do require of you is having various things online on your website, pamphlets and things, to make it very clear to the public what your policies and best practices are on many things. One good example of that, when I was at a class talking with someone from another community, processes for going to the planning commission for site plan approval or special land use approval, you have to clearly have the process and the path to do so outlined on your website is one of the things that they require. The benefits of going through this are manyfold. Two of the main ones are it greatly opens up your ability, like Rachel and Victor mentioned with MEDC, to get grant monies. The other thing that it also opens up is if you so choose, you can pick specific locations or neighborhoods where you would like to see redevelopment. You don't have to do that, but that I believe is something that you can do. So if there is a neighborhood that is underdeveloped that could be better utilized, you can go through a process to make changes.
But that would work in tandem with the city.
Right, and it would still have to go through the process of going to planning commission.
Et cetera.
For instance, like Toski has one online, like a property for sale, it's a public lot. And I believe, and don't quote me, but someone can purchase that property and come in, but there's still stipulations on how many public parking spots there need to be. It would still have to go through the entire.
My concern is living in a larger city. The majority of my time, Austin, Texas, they've come in and just plowed down neighborhoods to put up so many multi-density housing in this area. It's just really, really not played well with the city at all and residents. And there's a lot of negative things there that I would like to not see happen here. So
We'll never have the projects in Harbor Springs.
You
You don't have to worry about that.
I realize that, but things can change. You never know.
And they'll never change.
Has.
Vicky?
Wasn't this something that Rachel had already started?
Yep, it was. Yep, we just paused it.
Yeah, it paused when Rachel left and it.
Well, a little bit after Rachel, it paused when COVID hit.
Okay,
We stopped the meetings and we just never restarted them.
yeah, so it was something that she had started.
Yes.
Quite a few years ago and went through all that.
2019.
Yes, okay. I'm
So
sorry.
we no longer have a staff member now, when she left, that's training for us. Now we have Rachel,
Nice,
this
okay,
Rachel.
yeah.
Rachel's back.
Rachel's back, like I said.
New Rachel.
Thanks, Jen. All right, I think we can move on. Planning Commission member. So we have Mary Catherine Hannah who left. Her seat needs to be filled. I'd hoped that we would fill it in December when we have more applicants. However, for example, looking at November 18th meeting, we needed 6 members to be there. We might only have 5 because we're still missing 1 from overall 9. So we're thinking, all right, if we want to be able to conduct business, special land use hearings, let's appoint a member now, or we can wait still to December and just say, hey, business can't continue on, let's wait. The reason why we didn't want to appoint, or I didn't recommend appointing Mary Catherine Hannah's seat there, that vacant seat, was because it expires in December of 2021. So then we have to reappoint them. What we could do is appoint them for this seat now and then reappoint them again, or just say they're appointed for this seat and appointed for term 22 to 20 through 25. So there are 5 applicants that gave their resumes, their applications. 2 of them are not within the city limits, so they can't serve on the planning commission. But right now, because we have 2 planning commission members who are not within the city limits, and we're allowed up to 2 non-city residents to serve on the planning commission. These other 2, Rocky and Kevin, have applied for other things, so they might be able to be considered for other boards. So the 3 residents who have applied, who live in city limits, that want to be on the planning commission are Paul Summers, Rick Turchinski, Eric Winsma. I have 1 other that came in today, Bob Toma, but he's also interested in Harbor Commission and ZBA. He's moving back into the city limits after his house is built, but the planning commission was his 3rd choice, so.
On Winsma, he has a house in Harbor Springs, but he doesn't live here. Does that disqualify him?
What I thought he did live.
He's a resident though. I mean, I know what you're saying.
Elector, is he?
Because he lives and works in Grand Rapids.
I think I'd have to look it up. I looked them all up last time. I
I
think
thought
he's a
he did.
voter.
He was a voter, right?
So that makes, don't quote me.
Yeah,
I
he
think
was
he
when we
was.
checked. But that was a few months ago.
Even if he's not here, it makes him eligible.
Right.
Can I just ask, why are we so short of the ones that are on planning? I mean, we have, 8 that are on planning, hunting season? So, I mean, why are we missing so many for the next meeting, I guess, rather than being
Al's
hurry?
foot, maybe.
We lost 2.
It's a 9-member board, so I think when you have that many people, you're going to have certain situations where 1 or 2 members can't make it because they have other commitments at some point in time. I think predominantly, most of the members make it, but there are occasions where 1 or 2 don't. It's fairly infrequent that we have 3 members that can't come to a meeting, which still would, in normal cases, provide us with the ability to have a quorum and act on a special land use. We're just in a unique situation here at this moment in time where we have 1 position that isn't filled, so we're down to 8, and we have 3 members that can't make a meeting.
But we will look at in December at the attendance record as requested and stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So this is not, this is a vacant position, so we can either decide or we can wait. If you want to see if more applicants come in, we can do it in December and just put off the business. I mean, even if we appoint someone right now, there's no guarantee that they'll make past Thursday meeting, right? I mean, we can't, they don't even probably know that it's up for today because we've been saying December, so.
So to make that recommendation.
So the mayor has the ability to recommend someone in the council.
So I would like to recommend Rick Tartinsky because I know he'll be here next week for the meeting. What a great idea. He wants to be involved in the city. He comes to the meetings. He's fairly up to speed. He's around.
Once you start annexing the outskirts of Harbor Springs, you'll have a larger pool of people.
Tried that once. Tried that one.
It went really well from here.
We will not be annexing anywhere.
So are we doing this for 1 month, basically?
Well, that's the question. Do you want to do this for 1 month or do you want to do it through the end of December, or do you want to do it at the end of December and also appoint him?
Yeah, I say if we're gonna do it for a month, we might as well do it for a month and 2 years.
It'd be 3 years. So we do it.
I agree.
Yeah. It would be to fill this vacant term.
Then we would be talking about 1 meeting and then reconsider.
Yeah.
He's qualified for 1 meeting, hopefully he's qualified
For all the
term.
meetings.
I don't know any of these people.
Yeah. He
His
lives
reason
in
for
town,
wanting-
I mean, he's active, he's been in meetings. My problem with Summers is we've got architects and builders and real estate guys already loaded up on the planning commission. He would be another one that fits in that category. And same thing with Winsbach, I mean, he's an architect. They do have some, at least knowledge of what's going on, but I think we've already got our fair share.
And you said he's already attending the meeting?
I don't know if he goes to the planning.
He does go to planning commission.
Am I right that on his application, again, I didn't look at him this morning when I got home. It was because I don't like the direction the city's going.
Yeah.
He's concerned about.
He's concerned about the direction. Okay, so I've got the right person in my head. Okay.
This was the most vague of the applications. I've talked to him.
But he's a year-round resident. I mean,
Yeah,
he's here.
he's around.
He's here.
He'll
which-
be here,
yeah.
which I think is a big thing.
Well, and he's certainly committed.
Yeah.
I mean, he's at a lot of our meetings. So that's a good thing.
Hey, if he's already going to meetings,
More power to him.
absolutely.
He's doing better than me.
I don't know about that.
So what do we need
So
to
the
do?
mayor has so we would need a vote. Yeah,
Like I said, I make a motion.
yeah, someone we need to support it.
I'll support, yeah.
Support.
John Cox.
Yeah.
John Leo.
Yes.
Al Dyke.
Yes.
Matt Vigera.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great. Jeff, I
I'll
know
reach
Pam
out
is
to
here,
him.
but can you also reach out and see if you can make Thursday's meeting?
I'll get on.
Great.
Does the planning commission, are they the ones that are working on the master plan?
Yes, yes.
So we're putting new people in on a project that's been ongoing for a while.
That's because people leave. We have to replace
It
them.
happens all the time.
Yeah. Terms that expire.
The master plan's been worked on for how many years now? 3, 4?
A year and a half, probably, is when we started work. We initiated in
It's a major.
2020.
I know, I realize, I'm sure.
Started talking in 19, yeah.
Late 2019, early 2020, so a little, almost 2 years. Yeah.
Got a little bogged down from the COVID.
Well, COVID interrupted a lot, yeah, so.
I actually went back and read your minutes, the minutes, everybody's plans, clear back to 2015, but that was a lot to absorb in 3 days. So if I ask questions, it's because some of it's running into each other, so thank you for clarifying.
All right.
You
Next.
must have been bored.
No, I was really concerned.
We all have different motivations.
Right.
Item 6A, this is under old new business. Basically, Kathy Emig, lives at 509 Spring Street, only removed one hedge, one tree hedge, when council directed her to remove 2. There was a different interpretation. I didn't have the minutes in front of me, so I told her to move the trees to behind the big tree that was there. She didn't do that either, so she didn't do either what I said or what council had said, but she generally just has issues with her neighbor, the property dispute, but she wants council to reconsider her appeal. I said the decision is final, but obviously council can decide whether or not they want to rehear whether or not she should remove 2 as required, or as you guys have required. I put it under old and new business because if you want to discuss it, I put it on a December 6th agenda item to rehear it. I really think that we shouldn't rehear it unless there's new information that would make you guys change your mind or you reconsider your original decision. And I really didn't see anything in there. There was some talk about potentially getting a petition of neighbors that like the way the hedges look, but
That doesn't really have anything
That
to do
is
with
irrelevant, really.
Pretty good the last time around. I don't know why we need to revisit.
Well, I don't want to referee 2 neighbors that
Yeah.
don't like each other.
And we didn't do it for that
That wasn't
reason. We
the
did
issue.
it because it was in the right way and we compromised to take the.
But to read what we got in this packet, I mean, it's clear, it's just 2 people that don't like each other.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to.
so then
It's not our place.
what I'll do is tell her to remove the second one, and if she doesn't remove the second one, we'll remove it ourselves, so. I know that's not the way we want to go with it, but no, but I gave her a month to remove both of them, she removed 1.
I just did it to a guy in West Traverse Township, fire department, remove the second one, or we'll remove them all the way to the end of the right of way.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah. It's all right. That's what we should have done in the first place.
Is that what you guys want me to say? Is that council direction?
That's what I think. It's tempting. She came to council, there was a discussion, there was an agreement. We should have an agreement and move it.
Yeah, we were pretty clear.
Really quick, city manager report, there was not a whole lot there. I was working from Vermont last week, but the capital improvements plan will be reviewed this Thursday's meeting and for planning commission and big council December 6th, concurrent in tandem with the budget. Yep, so it's gonna be another big meeting on December 6th, but that's 3 weeks away, so you have enough time to rest. 3-hour meeting, 3-hour week rest that's the rule here.
Nice.
They didn't really have a lot of boards and commission meetings. There was a DDA meeting, talked about Merchants Walkway improvements and replacing some of the bulbs and the globes on the light poles downtown. And I don't know if we want to go in.
I'll just pick.
Yeah, you can do that really quick.
All right, so you recall the Williams appeal was pending before the Court of Appeals, the one that from the CBA decision. The Court of Appeals affirmed the decision of the Circuit Court, thereby affirming what the decision of the CBA was. So that case is over, at least at this level. He can always appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court. It's unlikely that he would do so, but we don't know that.
Thanks, Jim.
The Demmer matter is still under discussion. Nothing to report there, but we'll get back with you when we have a recommendation, if one can be developed.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. You were old?
I got a little older sitting here today.
All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
I think that's the